beaten by his friends because he obtained an epic card. After years of trying the random box, when he finally succeeded, Ryuki was beaten by his friends who stole his card. Even so, they didn't stop hitting him and pulling his hair, saying it was just the shop's fee. At that moment, his head was slammed against the ground, but in the very next second, he stood up, his face completely battered. Ryuki ignored the bullies. His vision was blurry, but he headed straight for the shop, falling to the ground. He crawled just to spin the roulette one more time, wanting to try once again. Suddenly, a golden arc spun above the shop, because after failing so many times, he had finally been given a chance for revenge. One day, a golden tree took root in this world. The tree's name was Yggdrasil, and it grew rapidly, covering the world. This new world created by Yggdrasil was called the Labyrinth. People called it God's game, but not everyone could become a player. A man announces that the work is finally over and tells everyone to return their equipment immediately. An older man approaches number 7017 and tells him he did a good job today. He then asks if the young man wants to buy something good he has in stock for a low price. He offers a data item, explaining that since it's digital, it's less risky, but the effect isn't any weaker. As the young man walks away, the vendor calls him a cocky kid, saying he's just a nobody like them. Then the older man yells that the kid is just like all of them. He walks through an alley as a person begs for change. He then stops in front of an establishment called Random Box. Inside, a man bangs on the machine, questioning how this is fair and demanding his points back. Others around complain about losing their entire paycheck or beg for one more chance, and the young man notes he's left with only 5 stones. He sits down before the machine that can give him anything in existence. The random box is a legal gamble for those who chase luck, and then he looks at the screen. The featured item of the day is an SSR account creation permit, and he realizes this might be his only chance. The machine asks if he'd like to perform a 10-item draw, his only hope. Then the first item is released. He gets an N-rank toothbrush and moves on to the next one. Surrounded by useless items, he continues to use the machine. Next, he gets another N-rank item and another one right after. An R-rank item finally appears. The young man laments that even though they say SR and SSR exist, he's only ever gotten N and R ranks. He's done this so many times he's lost count, wishing it would just come once. Then he remembers holding his mother's hand in her hospital bed. The image of his mother flashes in his mind. Back in the present, the machine in front of him starts to operate differently. He wonders if it could be an SR or maybe even something more. Then an item is ejected from the machine, and an SSR cube, a special super rare item, appears before him. He stares at the prize, something he thought he'd never obtain. His hand reaches out for the miracle he couldn't even dream of. He holds the item, reminding himself he couldn't give up. Before him lies his last hope and Yggdrasil identification card. The account creation permit is the key to the Yggdrasil Labyrinth, a world based on countless games. The only way to access this place is by using an avatar from a game account. Although avatars are virtual bodies, they are the only means of bringing items from the labyrinth into the real world. These virtual items have changed society, and humanity has come to depend entirely on Yggdrasil. In this era, those who lead society are the players, but this privilege is granted to only a limited number of people. The young man kicks the stool as he stands up and leaves the establishment. He runs, realizing he can now create an account and become a player. He faces his chance to start over. Then he dashes out of the place, planning to register his account in the central zone. Suddenly, he finds himself on the ground. He questions what's happening, and a voice asks the boss if that's the guy. A man confirms he's the lucky guy who got an SSR, but that his luck has run out. Another man hands the account creation permit to the boss, commenting on the kid's luck. The group's boss admits he never thought he'd see one of these outside of the listings. On the ground, the young man just says that no, he's the one who got it. The leader calls him a foolish kid and simply tells his men to hold him down. Then he's thrown down hard. He hits the ground again. As he crawls, he grabs one of the men's legs, begging for his account back. The attacker confronts him harshly, asking if he's forgotten what it's like to live as a nobody. The boss then grabs him, saying if he got something good from their shop, he needs to pay the fee, but not to worry because they're fair. He stares at him up close and says they'll make a very fair trade. Then, 30,000 points are transferred to him, just enough for a single draw. The boss shoves him, telling him to use the points however he wants, since the trade is done. He then yells for the kid to let go of him at once. The young man's hand finally lets go of the man's pants. The leader calls him a persistent kid. As the gang walks away in the rain, planning what to do with the money, he remains on the ground. His hand rests in a puddle of water. One of the goons calls out to the boss, who asks what it is now. He points out that the kid is still getting up. The young man pushes himself up to his knees, and one of the men is surprised he can still stand. A warning notification appears, informing him that his vitals are critical, and he should seek a medical institution. He takes a step forward. Even as he stumbles, he keeps moving forward as the warning persists. The boss asks if he wants more, but one of his men points to something. The men watch the kid head back to the shop, and one of them comments that if he weren't so determined, he never would have gotten an SSR. The boss suggests that if he gets something good again, they'll make another deal with him. One of the men asks what will happen if he collapses, and the leader replies that nobody would care about a nobody. The warning that his vitals are extremely critical continues to flash for the young man. He can barely breathe or hear anything around him. His vision starts to spin, showing distorted images of the place. He struggles through the establishment toward the machine. Then he takes another step forward. The young man finally collapses on the floor right in front of the gacha panel. Even on the ground, he reaches out to try one more time. With great effort, he inches closer to press the button one last time. He rests his head on the machine, his hand trembling. He stares at the screen, receiving the warning about his vitals again. Suddenly, the gang leader notices a light coming from the shop and wonders what it is. A character conversion is forced, and the Yggdrasil system asks him to enter his character's name. A young man named Ryuki finds himself on a podium under a spotlight. He looks at his hands and wonders why he's wearing handcuffs. A voice declares him guilty of leaking confidential guild information and exiles him, but he claims it wasn't him. The trial then determines that the accused must plead guilty to all charges. He realizes he can't speak as two silhouettes appear and a voice congratulates the stranger on the start of his new life. Facing the emerging figures, he insists it's not true and that he didn't do it. Then he is left alone and handcuffed under the spotlight. The memory of his mother surfaces as he screams that he needs to earn money for her surgery, but a voice says it's too late and tells 7017 to wake up. The young man suddenly wakes up with a scream. He finds himself sitting in a reflecting pool and wonders where he is. A floating object appears and he realizes this isn't reality, questioning if it might be the other side. The object addresses him as master and asks him to enter his character's name, which startles him. He points at the object and calls it a flying cleaning robot, but the device introduces itself as Lygon, the system for the random box device. Then, Lygon congratulates him on obtaining the only rank item in the world. The young man questions what rank is, as he only knew of N, R, SR, and SSR rarities. An item appears before him. Lygon explains that this place is the rift between reality and Yggdrasil. Then the system asks the master for a name to complete the conversion and grant access to the labyrinth. The young man questions the conversion, but Lygon states that it intervened because its master's life was in danger. It then explains that they are now trying to access Yggdrasil by converting his body through the system. Lygon again asks the master to enter the character's name. The young man decides to take the small chance of success he has. The setup is completed and his body begins to react. He shields his face as the system announces the transport to the labyrinth. Access is finally complete. Then, he is welcomed to the world of Phantasm. The young man observes the new scenery around him. He feels the wind blow through his hair. He also feels the earth beneath his feet. Then he realizes that this is the labyrinth he had longed for so much. Suddenly, he's confronted by a group of approaching armed skeletons. One of the creatures lunges forward to attack him by surprise. He starts running, questioning why he's in a hunting area instead of a tutorial map. An information window identifies the monster as a level 1 skeleton, weak to physical damage. As he flees, he tries to open his status window, but Lygon tells him not to panic. The young man complains that he doesn't even have starter gear, even though the conversion to a player was successful. Lygon explains that the master is not a player of this particular labyrinth and the system's calibration doesn't apply to him. This means he won't receive levels, stats, or skills, which leaves him outraged. Lygon takes offense and suggests that if he really wants something, he should use a random box. 2 system windows appear showing his login and achievement completion rewards, totaling 105 tickets. He decides to use all 106 tickets he received as a performance reward. With the skeletons closing in, he just hopes to get anything that can be used as a weapon. An item materializes in his hand. He challenges the piles of bones, saying he'll turn them into ramen broth. Then, he attacks one of the skeletons with the end toilet brush he just received. He stands there with the broken brush in his hand as Lygon tells him to keep using the items. He runs and yells at the system, saying he only got junk, but Lygon questions how he managed to get the item. One of the skeletons appears wearing a wig, and the young man complains that the monsters are still chasing him. As he runs amidst the useless items, Lygon warns him to watch his step. He then trips and falls flat on his back. Leaning against a tree, he sees the skeleton running toward him to attack. He then calls for Lygon, and a new item appears in his hand. He braces for impact. With a newly acquired R-short sword, he manages to block the skeleton's blow. He now wields a sword and celebrates finally getting a decent weapon. He claims that small monsters like skeletons are nothing to him. He then attacks the creature, saying that with a decent weapon, they are no match. But the strike doesn't work, and he realizes the skeleton's HP should have been depleted with just 2 hits. Lygon reaffirms that the master cannot use the labyrinth system, and this includes combat mechanics and HP drain. Facing the skeleton as it prepares to attack, he laments that his end will be ridiculous after getting his miraculous chance. As the skeleton strikes, another item appears behind the young man, who refuses to be defeated in a place like this. A new item falls onto the grass beside him. He then declares that he won't be beaten and blocks the monster's blow. With the impact, the creature is knocked to the ground, leaving him surprised. He wonders if that was a skill, one that doesn't even exist in the world of Phantasm. He then receives the skills Parry and Sword Mastery, both SR rank. Lygon explains that this type of random box is not subject to the restrictions of any system. The system states that, in other words, he can obtain everything, while the skeleton reassembles itself to attack again. With his new skill, he parries the monster's blow, leaving it defenseless. The bony creature is immobilized, its wig flying off. He then lunges at the skeleton, and with a single move, he defeats the skeleton once and for all. He realizes he can use any skill he wants, ignoring the labyrinth's laws and restrictions. With this power, the very balance of Yggdrasil could be affected, and Wygon expresses that it always believed in its master. Dagon states that, as expected, the person who drew the item is on another level. The system is surprised that he managed to get an SSR rank item on his very first day. He laughs, remembering that this was a miraculous opportunity from the start, so it doesn't matter if another miracle happens now. He faces the remaining skeletons, determined to seize the slightest chance of survival. He tightens his grip on his sword's hilt. Then he lunges forward with a single strike, defeating the enemies before him. World of Phantasm is the flagship title of the major game developer, Recap, and every player aims to reach the top of the labyrinth's rankings. Then the skeleton is finally defeated. From the defeated creature, a skeleton magic stone emerges. He declares that he's no exception and will also aim for the top. After the confrontation, he says that should be enough for now. The Yahello system informs him he has defeated 7 skeletons and acquired 5 magic stones. His experience points have been converted into random box points. Yahello explains this as a point system that replaces experience, and the young man calculates he needs 15 skeletons per instance. But he remembers the last item that appeared, the SSR. He questions how something so absurd can exist, and Wygon replies that it wouldn't be an SSR otherwise. The young man decides to seal the item for a while, much to the system's surprise. He thinks that if he used that thing, even that man's guild would be defeated, so he decides to check his equipment skills. Noticing he needs 700 RP for the next level, he realizes he needs to farm, and they've appeared right on time. A new group of skeletons emerges from between the trees. He charges forward with his sword, stating that time efficiency is key when farming. Then, another group of skeletons rushes toward him. A large explosion occurs in the forest. On his 3rd day logged into World of Phantasm, he faces the last skeleton as it crumbles away. He then checks the Wagon system window and sees he's completed all the daily quests. Considering that time in the labyrinth is 10 times faster, he thinks 7 hours of farming for 1500 RP isn't bad at all. Yahello gets excited about the 1500 RP and encourages its master to do a 10 gacha pull immediately. The young man looks at his status window as the system announces the start of the gacha. He uses the points to increase his sword mastery and parry levels, while Wygon questions what he's doing. The system calls its master insane for using precious RP on skills, but he replies that the skill system is also part of his power. He asks about the drop rates for each rank, and Wygon replies that the chances for N are 70% and for SSR are just 0.3%. Outraged by the list of useless items, he yells that the ticket results are too cheap, but Wygon reminds him he got everything from SR to SSR on his first ticket. Yahello begs for the points he worked so hard to collect, but the young man says the quest tickets are enough for the random boxes. Yahello asks how long he plans to stay in the tutorial area, and he replies that he doesn't know yet, as he needs to level up his weapons and skills. He states that he prides himself on knowing more about WAP than anyone else and will use all the information he gathered in the past. He claims that the Forest of Beginnings is the best hunting ground for the early game. He knows that once he leaves, he can never return, so he decides they should grow as much as possible before moving on. So he decides to see how far he can fight without levels and stat corrections, knowing he can also get a guaranteed SR ticket from the login bonus. The Yahello system displays the 7th day login bonus, a guaranteed Wygon SR ticket. He grows tired, concluding that his level farming has hit a dead end. He then checks his equipped skills and sees that sword mastery and parry are at level 3. He realizes the skill levels he can raise here are reaching their limit, so he wonders if they should move on to the next stage. Yahello suggests they use the 1-week login bonus for the gacha, and he simply agrees. He activates the ticket, believing that with a guaranteed SR there won't be any junk, but it all comes down to luck. An item then begins to materialize before him. He comments that something extraordinary came through, even for a pickup, and Wygon just states that a pickup is a pickup. A system window displays the new item, the SR rank Gunblade. He wields the new weapon. It would cause an uproar if it went public. He then tests the weapon on a nearby tree, and with a single strike he slices the tree in half. He assesses that, considering his sword mastery, the new weapon's power is incredibly strong and that maybe he can do that thing with it. He then wonders what would happen if he died here. Since he converted his body, he would also die in reality. Yahello explains that even if its master dies, it's possible to revive him using the backup on Yggdrasil. The system, however, warns that it will be painful enough to make him wish he were dead. He simply asks if that's all, stating that as long as he doesn't really die, it's fine. He then orders Wygon to use all the remaining tickets on the gacha to increase his combat power a little. After using the tickets, he finally gets an R-rank leather armor set, which he considers useful. He complains to Wygon for dropping him in the hunting ground, but the system replies that the accuracy wasn't bad for an external login. The young man then instructs the system to record all his gameplay footage from now on, as it will be a great show. Yegon asks for the file name, and he replies to call it The Unknown Escapes the Abyss. He explains that although this place is considered one of the best, Laishia's games are mass-produced and full of flaws. As he walks, he prepares to give an example. Suddenly, a huge knight in black armor appears before him. The Yegon system identifies the enemy as the Black Knight Chaos. Immediately, a sudden quest is activated. Defeat the Black Knight of Chaos. With the sudden quest accepted, he prepares to begin the experiment. The demon god's knight introduces himself, revealing he awaits the strong at the edge of the void. Then, the knight attacks with his sword, and the young man blocks the blow. He pushes the enemy blade away and points the gunblade at the knight. The blow is parried, resulting in a heavy impact between the two. He realizes that his successful parry allows him to ignore the opponent's power and level difference. Then, he fires the gunblade at point-blank range. The shot hits the knight's armor, but has no effect. He discovers the attack was useless, and that the opponent's defense cannot be penetrated. Although Yegon confirms he can ignore the system's buff, the young man insists it's still not working. Yegon calls him an idiot, telling him to think practically about whether a blade like that can cut through metal armor. He finally understands, as he was only considering system-based strategies. As the knight prepares to attack, Ryuki states that in a world modeled after a game, he is different from normal players who would be affected by the system, but not him. Then, he takes a step forward. He leaps toward the knight, deciding to aim for a realistic weak spot. The knight braces for the imminent attack. He then drives the blade of his weapon into the knight's armor, hitting him in the shoulder. He then prepares a shot. The point-blank shot creates an explosion that hits him and neutralizes his arm. The knight's hand slams into the ground, destabilizing him. He charges toward the enemy, who is recovering from the previous blow. He realizes that, free from the system, he can inflict direct damage to his opponent's physical body. With this power, he believes he can take them down in a single strike by aiming for their vital points. Suddenly, an attack hits him, and Yegon alerts him to the danger. He's surprised by the long-range attack, something he didn't expect from the Black Knight's usual pattern. The knight watches him from a distance as the attack dissipates into the air. His enemy calls him a powerful warrior, a threat to the gods. Then, the knight challenges him to prove the essence of the void, launching a new attack. The young man tries to dodge the multiple strikes erupting from the ground. He realizes he was naive. The Black Knight is a mid-game enemy that can't be faced with basic gear. Besides, he remembers he's in a no-return zone, which means there's no escape. He tries to parry the countless attacks, but realizes there are too many. Yegon screams for its master, who is hit head-on. The young man feels the impact of the multiple attacks, leaving him severely wounded. He slams his hand on the table, saying he can't accept this. Ryuki, an expert analyst for the Dronzer Guild, questions why his strategy guide was rejected again. In a meeting, a superior states the guide he submitted is for an area Unfell has already cleared, but Ryuki insists his strategy is more efficient. The man calls him by name and says that even with S-rank players, it's just a standard strategy for someone who's already high-level. He states there will be no re-evaluation, as this is the will of the guild's ace, Unfell. The superior then asks if he's not going to challenge the decision. Ryuki slams his fist on the table. He gets angry that they always have to check on Unfell's mood. Then he calms down, deciding to focus on the cost of his mother's surgery, and thinking about how to make the guild recognize his strength. Suddenly, a voice calls his name. He's startled to see a colleague who apologizes and offers him a coffee. Cynthia, a researcher from the Dronzer Guild, hands him the drink and he thanks her. She asks about the strategy guide that was rejected multiple times, saying she's worried he's too focused on it. As he sips his coffee, she asks if he minds if she helps a little. He accepts her help and explains that the final part of the strategy is confidential information, asking her to request the necessary materials from their superiors. Cynthia simply agrees to help. She states that if there's anything she can do, she'll gladly help him. At the hospital, he holds his mother's hand and tells her not to be surprised, as the date for her surgery has finally been set. She asks about the money, but he reassures her, saying his strategy guide was approved this time. His mother questions him, asking if it's really true. Then she hugs him, praising his hard work, and he mentions it was all thanks to Cynthia. He comforts her, saying she doesn't need to worry anymore and that hard work pays off. Suddenly, he is informed that for leaking confidential guild information, he is expelled from Linzia. In a meeting room, a superior reveals they've already secured proof and that Unfell and Cynthia conducted everything secretly. Cynthia's name echoes in his thoughts. Linfell Darius, the guild's vice master, complains about the inconvenience and questions if it's okay to waste the ace's precious time on this. He then asks Ryuki if he's the one who kept sending those annoying strategy guides. Linfell says he was curious about his face, but seeing such a pathetic expression made him lose interest. With his arm around Cynthia, he apologizes for getting her involved with someone like that and invites her for a drink as her supporter. As he leaves, he touches Ryuki's shoulder and says this is what happens when you don't know your place. Linfell accuses him of talking behind their backs and arrogantly creating a strategy guide, asking if he's forgotten his place. Then he congratulates him, as this is the moment his boring life ends. As he leaves, he revokes Ryuki's rank, demoting him to an unknown. The verdict is announced and the defendant is found guilty on all charges, with all his assets revoked. Not even his own name was spared, and back in the present, he recovers from the attack. The Black Knight is surprised that he's still withstanding the attack. He struggles to stay on his feet, and the Knight questions where so much power comes from. The Knight states that no matter what the power is, the blessing of the demon god cannot be stopped, nor will it yield. He wonders if this is the end and if everything will really end here. He reflects that if that's the case, his life has been nothing but a pile of trash until now. Then the image of his mother appears in his mind, along with the promise he made. He swore he would get everything back exactly as it was before. Suddenly, one of the attacks hits him hard from the side, but he grits his teeth as the fight starts now. He plants his feet firmly on the ground, determined to get out of there. Then he leaps at the Knight, striking him with his weapon. With a direct hit, he strikes the Knight's helm. He promises to deal with his adversaries, remembering Linful and Cynthia. He finishes the Knight with a shot from his weapon. He swears he won't leave a single one of them and will defeat them all. With one last effort, he completely defeats the Black Knight. The Yahello system displays the battle report showing the emergency mission and achievements completed. The fallen Knight acknowledges his strength for having overcome the void, and the enemy tells him to move forward, and he replies that he has no other choice. He crouches beside the defeated Knight on the shattered ground. The scene of his victory is displayed on a monitor elsewhere. A man in glasses asks when that footage was sent. A subordinate replies it was a few hours ago and asks if they should try to make contact. The man says it won't be necessary and tells him to get the car ready. Gabriel Darius, the master of the Linzia Guild, asks where Linful is. On EagTube, people are commenting about seeing that thing. They're discussing Ryu 7017's video, Escape of the Unknown. Commenters doubt a sub-silver player could even access that area. They call it fake news and question if that was really the Black Knight. Others saw the guns word in the video, wondering if it can actually be used to parry. In an online discussion, people comment that no matter how they look at it, the Black Knight's defeat seems absurd. With the video hitting 302,000 views, most agree it must be a bug, as there's no other explanation. In a meeting, analysts discuss the player's inexplicable reaction speed. One of them jokes that his brain hurts trying to understand it. Ragnar, a second-year analyst from the Linzia Guild, comments on the feat, asking if the player's name was Ryu 7017. She prides herself on being an expert, but admits that the footage is beyond her understanding. She suggests the player must have used a glitch and that the guild should contact him officially, but her superior disagrees. The senior, surprised, recognizes the face in the video, though he believes it's impossible for an unknown to have an account. Lying in a bed, Linful asks who Ryuki is. Gabriel explains he was an analyst at Linzia 3 years ago, the creator of that strategy guide. He reminds Linful that he demanded his expulsion, which made him an unknown. Gabriel informs him that the man posted a video today where he defeated the Chaos Black Knight alone. Linful replies that he saw it too. Linful dismisses the victory as a glitch, but Gabriel reminds him that he was the one who cast that man aside. Indignant, he yells that he doesn't know anything and questions when they became so cowardly. But Gabriel remains silent as Linful claims that wasting time on a nobody is useless. Outside, a subordinate asks about the next step. Gabriel deduces that he's deliberately provoking them. He then orders an investigation into the young man's movements since his exile, and the man agrees. Gabriel decides there's no need for immediate action, as they can gather more information before making a move, but he worries that his foolish younger brother might do something rash. Back in the game, a system window informs him that his body's recovery rate is at 87% and he can now move. The young man stands up, saying he thought he'd be in extreme pain. Yigan explains the severity of his injuries. He then states that he'll get used to this level of pain as he'll experience it hundreds of times more. Then he takes a step forward and wonders if this is where they begin. He observes the landscape before him and says goodbye to the tutorial area. He acknowledges that the game world is structured around the main content, the Demon God Tower, but he knows they can't go straight to the tower yet, as they first need to conquer the surrounding dungeons. Yigan questions his decision to release the footage, but he assures it that he's aware of the risks and that his enemies won't act on something so trivial. He explains that for now, they probably think it's just a simple glitch, since exploiting bugs isn't uncommon in games. Since he made a conspicuous appearance knowing they hold a grudge, they'll start by gathering information and suspecting a trap. Yigan confirms the strategy is to release the video to cause confusion. He adds that the more attention it draws, the more limited their options become. He then asks if they can hide his physical body in the labyrinth, and Yigan praises the idea of using the Ur's resources in such a way. He states that now that they've secured a way to defeat Linful Darius, all that's left is to lure him out. His very existence is sure to make him act. With a clenched fist, he decides they will provoke him relentlessly. The moment Linful shows up will be their chance. He then declares that it will be their chance to beat him. Yigan suggests they use the insane amount of ticket points they've accumulated to pull some gachas and have fun along the way. As Wygon prepares to use the 20 tickets and 15,000 RP, he reminds it that getting to the village is the priority. He needs to leave the labyrinth every 10 days to keep his body safe. The system explains that unlike avatars, his conversion method transfers the actual physical body into the game, making such low-level concerns unnecessary. He understands that he's not an avatar, but his real body in that world. Yegon recommends returning to reality at least once due to the forced conversion. Looking at the system screen, he simply orders the conversion to be executed. Back in the real world, he finds himself inside a room with several machines. He approaches the random box shop, realizing he's really back in the last place he was. He finds it strange not to feel any abnormality in his body, despite being in a critical situation. Yegon asks if he now understands the greatness of the system. Yegon informs him about several illegal cameras in the shop and asks if it should block them. Suddenly, a group of men enters and calls him an unknown. The group's leader greets him, surprised that he wasn't defeated, and asks where he's been hiding all day. He stares at the men before him, remembering their previous confrontation. The leader explains they came as soon as they saw him on the cameras and mentions he got something unusual the day before. One of the goons yells that he's running away, and the young man breaks the window to escape. Yegon asks why he's running. He replies that it's obvious as he can't handle more than 10 opponents. The system understands and offers to find a safe route for him. Yegon instructs him to turn at the next corner, go straight, and then turn left. He questions if he can trust the system. He shouts as he realizes what's in front of him. He finds himself at a dead end and realizes he was a fool to trust a system he considers useless. He turns to confront Wygon, who insists there's a good reason for this. The group of men corners him and the leader asks if they should stop the chase. He complains about the trouble the young man has caused and says he's curious to know what he discovered. The man holds out his hand and, saying he doesn't want any trouble, demands he hand over the item quietly. He realizes these guys were after Wygon from the start and asks the system to initiate the conversion once more. Yegon informs him of a discarded wooden sword to his left, and he picks it up confused. The system explains that since he has no special items, it guided him via the shortest route to obtain a sword and asks him to equip it. He complains that it's just a wooden sword and questions what he can do with it. One of the men asks if he wants to fight with that thing, and the leader tells him to move in. The goon gets ready to attack, telling the unknown not to get cocky, but before he can attack, his metal rod shatters in his hand. He's hit by a swift blow. The man falls to the ground, leaving everyone else stunned by what happened. The group of goons prepares to move in and stop him at once. He smiles and says it won't be that easy, as this isn't a labyrinth. His sword mastery and parry skills activate. With the sword in hand, he readies himself for the fight, as the men accuse him of using a cheat. The henchmen wonder what just happened and if their boss didn't pick a fight with someone dangerous. The gang leader grinds his teeth. He yells at his men not to back down because of some nobody. He urges them to advance, saying it doesn't matter how strong they are, and orders them to take him down. The leader claims that a nobody daring to challenge them is reckless, but there's no doubt they've landed something big. He introduces himself as a member of the Black Snakes, the rulers of this area, incomparable to mere nobodies. Suddenly, he's struck by a blow. Then, he screams for help as he's confronted. The young man approaches the last henchman standing, who begs him to stop. With the fight over, he approaches the leader and calls him a thug, telling him not to get cocky over so little. His swordsmanship skill is at level 3. He realizes that the moment he held the wooden sword, the feeling of using his skills came to him, a different kind of conversion than that of ordinary players. Since he converted his real body and not an avatar, if he gets stronger in the labyrinth, he'll also get stronger in real life. He glares at the fallen men, saying there's a loose end he left behind when they stole his account creation rights the day before. The henchmen get up and rush to attack him with furious yells. With his swift move, he takes down one of the men. Then, he neutralizes another henchman with a precise strike. He approaches the fallen gang leader, saying he must be the boss. Sitting on the ground, the man listens as the young man mentions how he was defeated by him the day before. The leader tries to attack him with his club, yelling for him to stay back, but the young man easily parries the blow with his branch. His level 3 parry skill activates. He glares at the boss and asks if, since all his underlings were defeated, he shouldn't be seeking a rematch. The man yells and rushes to attack him again. With a single move, he pins the man's hand to the ground with a piece of wood. He approaches the restrained enemy and asks if this is really the end. The leader shouts his name, Ruga of the Black Snakes. Before he can finish, the young man cuts him off with a blow. He looks down at the fallen man, commenting on how interesting it is to have power and wondering if this is how he felt when he defeated him. Defeated, the leader begs him to stop, and the young man just says that this state is well-deserved. He tells the fallen man that the account creation rights were his only hope, and now he will take his hope away too. The gang leader threatens him, saying that nobody messing with a bronze rank won't get away with it, but he simply replies that it's no problem, as he just needs to ensure the man's silence. The man pleads for help. Then he delivers a final blow, neutralizing the gang leader. Yegon asks why he didn't deal with those individuals permanently, since there's a high chance they'll retaliate. Lying on the roof, he replies that going to such extremes isn't easy, and that he won't stoop to their level. Aegon notes that fear and conflict are human weaknesses, and he asks if the system also did something to them. The system confirms, explaining that it interfered with their internal devices and manipulated their visual information. He's surprised Wagon can do that kind of thing, and the system explains that the manipulation only works when their mental state is unstable. Aegon states that they must have seen him as a terrifying figure, an entity that inspires so much fear they wouldn't even think of challenging him. Sitting in his room, he says that for now, they need to keep his existence a complete secret, as the world could be turned upside down if the news got out. He then picks up a small knife. He wonders if skills can be activated if something is recognized as a sword, since swordsmanship and its associated movements seem to have become instinctive. Wielding the knife, he concludes that this is good as long-range weapons are inconvenient to carry. He asks Wygon about something that intrigues him, and the system explains that since he is in existence from outside Yggdrasil, there are no side effects like accelerated aging. He replies that this was expected, as something with such flaws couldn't be called Elsewhere, he meets with the gang leader and questions if they should start moving. He observes a small knife, commenting on how impressive it is, and asks the man if he's recovered this much in just a few hours. The man agrees, complaining about how that nobody left him in that state and still had the audacity to summon him. He shows the knife and says the medical fees were paid with the money from the account creation rights, and the man promises to pay him back immediately. With a serious look, he tells him to shut up. He reminds him that he was only spared on a whim and that he shouldn't forget it. The young man hurries him to lead the way, and the man agrees to go at once. They arrive at the entertainment district. A man is lying in an alley in clear distress. He makes a sound of discomfort. The gang leader pushes a man out of the way, and they continue walking. They arrive at a place called Yorozuya Shutenkau, and the man confirms that almost everyone uses this place for illegal transactions. He peeks through the door, realizing this is where his account creation rights were sold, and the man stammers in response. Someone approaches, asking if they have a customer and welcoming them. He questions if the voice he heard belongs to the shop owner. Shizuki, the master of Shutenku, introduces himself and asks if the stranger is looking for something. Egon informs him that this is not a human body, and he notices the voice was strange, questioning if full-body imitation wasn't prohibited. Shuzuki praises his sharp eye, but reminds him it's amusing for a black market dealer to talk about laws, and then asks what brings him here. He approaches the counter and asks what happened to his account creation rights. The man who guided him is startled by the question. Shuzuki explains that account creation rights are a popular item, and that, unfortunately, they are sold out and no longer available here. He asks if that's the only reason the young man came, and he replies that it's not. The young man places a bag on the counter, saying he's come to make a deal, and Shizuki states that Shutenku handles everything, even the most delicate requests. The shop owner opens the bag, eager to see the product. He stares at the contents, surprised, and asks what it is. Shizuki looks at the bag and asks if those are magic stones. He then questions if the young man knows their value, but the guy tells him not to underestimate him just because he's an unknown. Items in the labyrinth are divided into two main types: common items that can't be materialized in the real world, and special items that can be materialized outside the labyrinth. Magic stones are special items from which ether, the modern world's main energy source, is extracted. The higher the stone's rank, the purer the ether. Shizuki finds it hard to understand why he'd sell to a black market dealer. The young man replies that he wants to sell it discreetly, since he obtained it directly. Shizuki calls him bold, saying there's no way an unknown could get a magic stone. The shopkeeper tells Ruga to go home. The man hesitates to leave, but with a single glance, the young man orders him to leave. Ruga scrambles out of the shop. Shizuki explains that at first he thought he was just some lucky guy who'd swiped a magic stone, which is normal for an unknown. But recently, someone who deviates from that norm has appeared. The young man asks what he means by that. Shizuki says he thought it might be the case, but he didn't expect the star of that viral video to come to his shop. With open arms, he welcomes Ryu 7017 once more. Holding the magic stone, he warns him that he was careless in trying to hide his identity. Shizuki reveals the appraisal app shows this is the magic stone of the Chaos Black Knight, and that he's the only one who has defeated him in the tutorial area. He then asks again what Ryu 7017 is doing in his shop. The young man confirms his identity and, thanking him for the advice, says it's time to get down to business. Shizuki asks what he's looking for from a black market dealer. He simply replies, a mod. He points to his head and asks if the shopkeeper has any. Shizuki questions him, asking if he knows what mods are. He replies that they are applications that alter the labyrinth's components, but the shopkeeper explains that most mods were discarded due to a lack of functionality and critical flaws. He insists, saying a black market dealer must have some products stashed away. The young man states his goal is to lower the labyrinth's difficulty and he can handle some side effects. So Shizuki asks if he saw the debilitated man near the shop. He remembers the man in great distress and asks what about him. Shizuki reveals that man was a mod user. He explains the man bought the painless mod to experiment with sensory control, which reduces the sensation of pain. But Shizuki explains the outcome was negative. In exchange for reduced pain, his other senses became extremely sensitive, and he had a breakdown. He advises him to give up, as mods are things the administration directly banned and discarded. Shizuki mentions there are a few mods verified as safe, but those can be obtained through normal means. He then removes his monocle and looks at the young man. The young man steps forward, questioning if he looks like an ordinary player since he defeated the Chaos Black Knight alone. He gets closer and says people are already calling him a cheater. He points at Shizuki, saying he doesn't care if he's a genius with top-tier skills or some nobody exploiting system glitches. Then he states he doesn't care about the means or methods and he'll use them rather than let them sit here collecting dust. Shizuki asks if he's saying he can master the mods, and the young man questions if he isn't curious about what might happen. Intrigued, the shopkeeper decides to show him something. He leads him to another room and explains that when most mods were discarded, these were the ones he managed to save at the last minute. He opens a box with several discs and says that if the young man can really use mods, he should try one of these first. The young man picks up one of the discs, Ver-01, and Wygon informs him it's the mod, triple attack power. The system explains it has no practical effect, as it simply triples the numerical values with no real result. The young man then picks up another disc, Ver-01, and Yegon reveals it's the mod. 1 second future prediction, a good idea that failed in implementation. Yegon then describes other ineffective mods, like one that changes character appearances and another that multiplies skills by a negligible amount. The young man analyzes the 3000x sensitivity mod, which mainly affects pain, and concludes they are all useless. He tosses one of the discs aside and picks up another, asking about the mod, probability manipulation. Yegon calls him sharp, explaining that it manipulates the probabilities of possible events in the player's favor. The system states that since he's unaffected by avatar performance reductions, he can expect a 0.5 to 1% improvement in probabilities. He realizes that if this also affects loot boxes, it could be useful. He makes up his mind and informs Shizuki that he'll take that one and 2 others for a total of 3. Shizuki praises him for not being all talk and for precisely picking out the only decent items from a pile of junk. He's confused by the word junk. The shopkeeper explains he had orders to test customers who asked for mods and that he wasn't trying to trick him. Shizuki says he'll understand eventually, and as an apology, offers a special price so he can make good use of those items. A system window asks if he wants to install the external application, and he approves. Shizuki asks one last question. If he truly masters the use of mods, what does he plan to do with that power? The young man simply smiles. The great tree of Yggdrasil rises over the city. Back in the shop, Shizuki falls to the floor. Then he starts laughing. The young man raises a finger and declares he will be number 1. He will surpass the bronze and silver ranks, and the gold and platinum ranks as well. Then he states he will overcome all other competitors to rise to the pinnacle of the world. Shizuki concludes that this will be interesting. As he leaves, the shopkeeper invites him to visit any time. He observes the village landscape. With his new ID card in hand, he remarks that entry was surprisingly smooth, despite being a stranger. Yegon says everyone is a stranger in the labyrinth, and he looks out at the village. He walks through the bustling market. A vendor smiles at a customer. 2 children run excitedly down the street. He comments that the place looks like something out of a medieval fantasy. Yegon urges him to open the random boxes, but he calls it a gacha attic, and tells it to get a grip. He then notices something strange. The faces of the people around him turn grim. Yegon notices the stares and asks if they did something wrong. He explains that NPCs hate players because they're treated so poorly. Then he understands why they're getting those looks, and suddenly he hears someone shouting. A man is holding another on the ground. The vendor accuses him of having the audacity to steal from his shop, but the man apologizes, saying he was just too hungry. He watches the commotion as a man is taken away. He notices that the NPC's clothing looks different from the village's style. Yegon informs him that this is a resident of the Space Alien Labyrinth, a game that Yggdrasil shut down 3 months ago. When a labyrinth is shut down, the game disappears completely, and its residents are forced to migrate to other labyrinths. He understands the reason for all the trouble, realizing it's not easy to adapt to a new world. Yegon warns him that Yggdrasil mercilessly shuts down any labyrinth deemed worthless, and that WAP is no exception, so he says they'd better hurry. He states that even if the game ends, as long as he can defeat Unfell and Lynzia before then, he'll be satisfied. He opens the door to an inn room. Once settled, Wygon asks if it's finally time to open the random boxes, but he says they'll check the mod first, and Wygon complains that the increased probability is cheating. He looks at the new probability rates, noticing that the N rate has decreased while the others have increased. He realizes the chance of getting an SSR has gone from 0.3% to 1%, which isn't a negligible difference. With a smile, he tells Wygon it's time for the long-awaited random box opening. With 40 tickets, 2 guaranteed SRs, and over 15,000 RP, Wygon gets excited, saying that an SSR is no longer just a dream. He then decides to use all 40 regular tickets first. He stares at the screen with a blank expression. A pile of useless items appears before him, the result of his 40 attempts. He looks at the mess in his room. He complains about the rigged rates, while Igon sarcastically congratulates him on his impressive performance. He expresses his frustration with the system, but Yegon pleads with him not to, saying it's for his own good. Suddenly, he has a flash of intuition. Then the guaranteed tickets are activated. Yegon changes its tune, celebrating the SSR and calling him a god for overcoming the rigged rates. He receives the SR rank skill Lightning Step and the SSR rank skill Intuition. The Yegon system displays the description for the Intuition skill, which enhances the sixth sense and is permanently active. He understands that Lightning Step is a high-speed movement skill, but questions what Intuition is. A notification informs him that the Intuition skill has been equipped. He doesn't feel any different and wonders if he should level up the skill, which has the same rank as that item from before. The skill management window shows that 7,000 RP are needed for the next level. He's shocked by the ridiculous amount of points since other skills only need 2,100 RP to level up 3 times. He hesitates, thinking it's ridiculous to put points into an unknown skill, while Yegon suggests they continue with the gacha, but he ignores the system and uses his RP to level up his skills, much to Yegon's despair. His sword mastery, parry, and lightning step skills all level up. He realizes he needs 8,400 RP to raise sword mastery to level 5, which would use up all his points. Yegon encourages him to use the remaining RP on the random boxes. He ignores the system again and uses the 8,400 RP to upgrade Sword Mastery to level 5. With the skill maxed out, he stands in the middle of the room. A system window informs him that the maximum level has been reached and a rank up is available. He understands why the skill needed so many points and decides to perform the rank up. He notices a strange light on the ceiling. An object begins to materialize in front of him, and he demands an explanation from Yegon. He shouts, asking what's happening, but the system remains silent. A sphere of light appears in the middle of the room. Then, the light dissipates. The Yegon system's achievement window informs him that he has completed the objectives of maxing out a skill and ranking up a skill. A new system window displays his enhanced skill, SR plus Sword Mastery. He realizes the rank went from SR to SR plus, a level he's never seen before, and that there's a stage beyond Mastery. Ryuki then stands with his arms open under a beam of light. While he celebrates, the Yegon below displays an error message. A system message questions why Yegon was chosen for a master like him, since the intention was to see him fail. Already in his armor, Ryuki orders Yegon to get up, as the real game is starting now. Yegon asks where they're going, and he replies that it's to the dungeon where Linful set a record. The system then asks if they'll be okay, since this is their first dungeon. He confidently states that he knows this dungeon better than anyone and won't lose to Linful. Outside a cave, Ryuki approaches a group whose leader is asking if everyone is ready. The man warns his group to stay alert at the entrance. Then the adventurer with the axe turns and notices Ryuki's presence. He confronts him, questioning how he plans to enter a dangerous dungeon alone. Ryuki just replies that he already knows and walks toward the entrance. The group watches him walk away, commenting that there are strange rumors about the dungeon and they decide to let him go. The group's leader comments that no one has been able to clear the dungeon for 3 months and laments the waste of time. Inside the witch's hideout dungeon, Ryuki confirms that the goal is to break Linful's record. He summons his weapon. He then announces the start of the attack. A mysterious voice notes that another intruder has arrived again. Watching the young man through an orb, the hooded figure calls him a despicable and unforgivable being. She questions how they dare to desecrate her sacred domain, but the figure warns them not to fear, for judgment awaits the invaders. Then she shatters the orb, declaring she will defeat him with her own hands, and she considers the intruder a worthy target. A system screen announces the dungeon witch's hideout. Ryuki receives an entry notification and a first-time reward. Once inside the cave, he comments to Yegon that it's too dark to see anything. He knows the dungeon's structure changes randomly and that he'll have to find the path himself. Then he remembers that Linful Darius cleared this place in 17 hours and 30 minutes. An Yegon system screen displays the rankings with Linful's party in first place. He's surprised to see that second place is only 8 minutes behind, with an hour-long gap to third. Ryuki reflects that Arcia from the GAES Guild might be a rival for Linful and decides to keep an eye on them. Suddenly, he senses enemies approaching in the darkness. He identifies the horde in front of him as giant bats. These creatures attack in swarms and are especially dangerous in caves with poor visibility. But Ryuki says that's old news as he activates a small device. He then throws the object onto the cave floor, and he covers his own ears, calling it his strategy. The device detonates amidst the swarm of creatures. Yegon asks what happened to his ears, and he explains it was a sonic bomb for the bats. The AI complains that a warning would have been nice, but Ryuki makes a sarcastic remark about its delicate ears. He moves forward and attacks one of the stunned bats on the ground. As he defeats the creatures, he explains to Wigon that understanding the dungeon's patterns is what reduces the clear time. What really worries him is that no one has managed to clear this place in the last 3 months. He finds it strange as this dungeon is known for its low difficulty and was treated like a tutorial after Linful cleared it. Wigon says it understands as the young man continues walking, but Wigon asks its master if he's sure they aren't lost. Ryuki assures it that this is the right way, reminding it about the importance of patterns, but Wigon comments that it feels like they're just walking in circles. He asks Wigon if it has any idea how many strategy guides he wrote in his days as an analyst, and he claims to have seen this dungeon thousands of times in simulations. Wigon insists they're walking in circles, but Ryuki points out that this entrance is different. Wigon asks how it's different, and he just tells it to look closer. He points out a curved scratch on the 32nd stalactite, unlike the straight scratches they'd seen so far, leaving Wigon in disbelief. This change only appears on the 33rd pass, which means the escape route has been unlocked. Wigon is amazed that he memorized the layout using such small details, but the young man just calls it a noisy piece of scrap. He then explains that the dungeon uses magic to confuse players' sense of direction, and that Linful had a team member with a special skill for that. But before that skill was discovered, he memorized every key point of the labyrinth and warns that they'll reach the next checkpoint in 5 minutes. Wigon still can't believe he memorized all the small differences by himself, something a normal player would never even attempt. Wigon thinks its master is crazy, but he warns that he can hear everything. He comments that they'll be out of the labyrinth soon, but they're already half an hour behind Linful's pace, taking longer than expected, and there's still the unresolved question of why players have failed to clear the dungeon for the past 3 months. The witch is enraged that the intruder dares to traverse her labyrinth, but she promises to plunge his hope into despair, and she guarantees it will happen the moment he steps out of the maze. The witch declares that he will be defeated by her instant death magic and become her test subject. The magic then completely envelops him. Wigon asks what's happening, but Ryuki isn't sure. He just states that the path ahead is dangerous. He wonders if it's his imagination as he holds a decoy doll. Then he throws the doll toward the trap, which is activated. He recognizes the instant death magic, which shouldn't appear until much later in the tower. As he wonders what the trap is doing here, Wigon advises him to retreat, as the dungeon's specifications have changed. He comments on such a nasty trap appearing so early. Then he stares down the hallway and wonders if they really need to turn back. The path to the right should be a dead end, but for some reason it feels safe. He realizes it was thanks to his new skill that he noticed the magic and considers it extremely powerful. A system screen displays the intuition skill, which is activated as soon as it's equipped. The witch calls him a lucky intruder for having escaped danger by such a narrow margin, but she assures him it's only a matter of time, as the labyrinth goes on forever and there's no escaping his doom. The witch scoffs, saying the labyrinth will be his eternal prison. Suddenly, she panics when she realizes he has escaped her watch and vanished into thin air. But then she manages to find him again. She sees he's in the central hall, far from the trap she set, and wonders what he did. In a new location, she says it doesn't matter, as that place will be his grave and she's prepared a special surprise. However, the moment the traps are activated, he disappears. The witch slams her fist on the table, annoyed that he's vanished again. Then she locates him in the old laboratory, on the other side of the central hall, and questions how it's possible. As she accuses him of using some kind of cheat to escape her curses, he nimbly dodges the traps. She can't believe he's dodging everything and has disappeared once more. The witch quickly looks for him in the underground storage, determined to catch what she calls an annoying worm. Then she decides to activate all the traps at once. Watching the result in her orb, she calls him a persistent insect, but concludes that in the end, that's all he was. And an explosion startles the witch. Wigon speaks directly to her, saying it warned her they'd reach the boss room, as Ryuki appears silently behind the witch. Wigon complains that this is cheating, but Ryuki walks down the stairs and says she just wanted to see him defeated. The witch demands to know how he got in. He claims that explaining would be complicated and that it's time to end her little game. She is the dungeon boss, the solitary witch Suriel. He draws his weapon. Then he points the blade at the enemy and claims to have a better name for her. He calls her Bug as her true mechanical form is revealed. Suriel questions how he survived the trap as Ryuki points his gunsword at her. He admits it was a close call, calling the place a minefield, and Wigon comments that he's starting to sound like the villain. In a previous moment, he was worried about already dealing with a bug and whether he could handle the instant death traps. He decides he needs to act now to solidify his position before Linful or the guild makes their move. Wigon warns him that it has detected numerous traps and recommends retreat, as it's nearly impossible to identify them all. But he takes a step forward. Then he lunges forward directly toward one of the traps. Wigon is thrown back and asks if its master is okay. He assures that he's fine, but Wigon is startled by his risky behavior, questioning if it's because of a gacha that went wrong. The young man says that doesn't matter now. Then he looks at the intuition skill icon and claims what he got was a jackpot. Suriel realizes his intuition is beyond cheat level, even allowing him to sense loopholes in spaces created by bugs. Ryuki comments that he hasn't even leveled up yet and that things are about to get even more interesting. Egon warns that while impressive, it's still just human intuition and will eventually hit a limit. He agrees but states that the most important thing now is to focus on the witch in front of him. The Yahello system displays the enemy's information with a corrupted name, and Serial screams intruder. She then summons a large spell and questions how he dares to do that. Ryuki faces the magical attack speeding toward him. He manages to dodge the blow and realizes exploiting the enemy's bug is a very effective tactic. Seeing that her attack pattern has become repetitive, he decides there's no reason to prolong the fight. A system screen displays the lightning step skill. He then uses the skill to leap over her, calling her a bug. Another system screen shows his swordsmanship mastery skill. He readies his weapon for a final blow, giving her credit for being tough, but stating he's ending it now. Serial screams that she's free and that no one can give her orders, telling him to be defeated in silence. Ryuki lunges forward and strikes the witch's mechanical body with a single blow. He looks at the scenery, which begins to glitch, and comments that it was easier than he expected. But suddenly, the witch's mechanical body reactivates and attacks him. The young man is thrown far back by the impact of the attack. As her corrupted form falls apart, the witch screams that it hurts so much. Egon explains that the witch is regenerating through self-replication, confirming she was the center of the dungeon's bug. He wonders if normal attacks are useless against the creature that attacks him again. Then he dodges the blows. Ryuki focuses, knowing he can't miss a single signal from his intuition, as one mistake would mean his defeat. He's hit by another attack from the creature. Desperate, he asks Weigun if there's any way, and the AI replies that it already predicted this and modified the universal appraisal mode. Egon informs him that he can now appraise monsters, and Ryuki activates the universal appraisal mode. The system displays the witch's true form, revealing her infinite regeneration and traps, which confuses him. He notices that the creature's wings have not yet been recognized by the system as she screams for him to be defeated. He dodges the attack and orders the system to appraise the wings. The analysis reveals the wings belong to a space alien, which intrigues him. He then remembers that Space Alien was the name of a maze game that was shut down 3 months ago. Ryuki finally understands that this game must be the source of the dungeon's bug. He attacks the witch's main body while Weigun looks completely perplexed. Yegon questions how its master can laugh in the middle of a dangerous trap where a single touch could mean the end. Yegon asks if its master has gone mad, but Ryuki states that he's aiming for the top of the food chain, leaving the witch confused by her inability to hit him. She then curses the miserable intruder. He realizes that if a single touch means defeat, then he simply needs to avoid being touched. Sariel launches a large sphere of energy at him while screaming for him to be defeated. The creature insists that he be defeated quickly as the magic explodes. She confidently states that she has cut off all his escape routes. But suddenly he appears right behind her, saying she's just like this dungeon. He climbs onto the creature's shoulders and explains that stolen power is a crutch for the weak and weaknesses always appear, just like the cracks in the dungeon. Now up close, he confirms that as he thought, the wings were the source of the bug. The witch begs him not to do it, explaining that those wings gave her freedom, a word that makes him thoughtful. She tells him she was trapped following orders for an eternity, and that the wings freed her from that curse. He says they are similar, as she also wanted to break free from her designated role. She asks that if they are truly alike, he should understand her wish, while he states that he fights to escape a world he deems unworthy. Serial then suggests that if that's true, they could join forces. But he replies that's exactly why he will annihilate her precious freedom to fuel his own rise. He then destroys the witch's wings with a single strike. Then a system screen announces that an SSR skill has been activated. The Agon system displays the enemy's appraisal, now back to her normal state as the dungeon boss. In a vision, Serial glares at him from her altar and calls him a foolish intruder for daring to enter her domain. The bug disappears and the boss returns to normal, demanding he kneel before her magic. But Ryuki charges forward and attacks her directly with his sword. He strikes her again, stating that the fact she's back to normal changes nothing. With a wounded face, he declares that she has lost and that he's aiming even higher. The Yagoan system displays the multiple rewards for clearing the dungeon, including first place in the rankings. Then a battle report details the experience and items gained from defeating Serial. Ryuki is disappointed with the rewards, comparing the meager 500 RP to the 15,000 granted by the Black Knight of Chaos. Yagon then comments that even the gods of randomness can fail him sometimes. But he states he didn't expect much from the items, as what mattered was securing the SR ticket and breaking Linful's record. Outside the dungeon, a group of adventurers laments having failed once again. One of the members asks why he keeps getting defeated, and another replies it's because he's always getting lost. The group leader tries to calm the argument, reminding everyone that the dungeon is in a strange state. He suggests they try to cooperate with other party members, and then turns to Ryuki, who has just emerged from the cave. One of the adventurers congratulates him for lasting 7 hours alone and asks if he's ready to give up and go home. The leader comments that he seems to have faced reality as he watches the young man walk away. Suddenly, he receives a notification that the dungeon's information has been updated. Then, he is shocked to see the rankings. The screen reveals Ryuki in first place with a time of 7 hours, 10 hours less than Linful's previous record. Everyone is in disbelief that the kid cleared the dungeon alone and even took first place, shattering Linful's record. A blade is stopped near Ryuki's neck. An adventurer grabs him and asks what kind of trick he used to pull that off. He claims it's impossible to cut the time by 10 hours alone and demands he reveal the secret. Ryuki simply explains that there was a bug in the dungeon and he used it to shorten the time. The other adventurers accuse him of using a cheat to break the record without using his own skills. One of them says he should be ashamed, while the young man wonders what these fools are talking about. He then reveals that he fixed the bug and advises them to focus on clearing the dungeon. The adventurer gets angry and says a cheater like him has no right to lecture them, but Ryuki easily dodges his attack. Then he hits him in the stomach with a shoulder bash. The man falls to the ground as the young man continues on his way. The adventurer gets up, promising to settle the score with him, but his group leader stops him. The leader warns that they're no match for Ryuki, but his companion insists on calling him a cheater. Then the leader yells at the man, explaining that Ryuki didn't exploit the bug, he solved it. The other group members realize he not only used the bug in his strategy but also fixed it, finding it all even more unbelievable. The adventurer leader watches the young man walk away, feeling like he's seen him somewhere before. Elsewhere, Ryuki plans his next steps, starting with the White Lake. Next, he'll go to the Red Spider Forest. And finally, he'll visit the ancient ruins of the gods. He explains that these are the most famous dungeons where Linful Darius's group set records. Egon asks why he isn't going to all of them, and the young man replies that another guild already broke one of the records 2 years ago. He remembers the player Arcia, whose team set a completion time suspiciously close to what he had predicted in his old strategy guide. This coincidence makes him strangely angry. Then he stands up, determined to start with the three, and Wygon asks if they are going to erase the annoying name Linful. Meanwhile, inside the demon god's tower, Linful's group is gathered. He rushes his companions to grab the loot, asking if they want to work overtime. Suddenly, he gets a notification. An image of a sea monster appears on his screen. He wonders if that's the White Lake, but hesitates for a moment. Next, another image shows a giant spider, and he questions if it's the Red Spider Forest. Linful Darius tells his companions to handle the loot themselves. He then warns that something has come up and he's going on ahead. Later, lying on a couch, he wonders about that unbelievable guy. Then he realizes the kid is deliberately targeting all his records to provoke him. He sits up and questions if the newbie thinks he's a big deal, but keeps thinking about the name Ryuki. No matter how hard he tries, he can't remember him and wonders if he ever really knew him. A man suddenly bursts into the room with big news, and Linful asks what the commotion is this time. Then he's told that the kid Ryuki is doing a live stream. Ragnar, an analyst for the Linza Guild, observes the situation. She already had an idea based on the top ranker's information, but now she sees new records for the Bug Dungeon, the White Lake, and the Red Spider Forest. She can hardly believe he took on 4 dungeons at once, broke all the records, and posted the videos simultaneously, generating an explosive response. To her, it's only natural that they were waiting for a new video since the Dark Knight Hunt. Although there are still unknown skills and items, the strategy shown in the video requires complete mastery of every element in the dungeon. The most shocking part is the completion of the witch's hideout, which no one had been able to clear for 3 months since the Phantasma group was defeated. And yet, Ryu 7017 cleared the dungeon as if it were nothing, leaving viewers full of questions about how it was possible. Ragnar states that although many claim the video was faked, it's clear that the witch's hideout has been completed. This would require an incredibly skilled analyst, which makes her question if another guild is backing him. She predicts this will cause a huge uproar on a level far greater than the Black Knight of Chaos incident. Ryuki thinks they must have been distracted by the flood of videos all at once, but he states that those videos are nothing compared to what he's about to post. Egon warns him that from now on they will see him as an enemy, but he replies that he's prepared for it. The AI then questions if it would be better to get a little stronger, hinting that its master is still a newbie. He agrees with Vigon, but explains that if he takes any longer, it will give them time to respond and he can't stop now. His time has been frozen since that moment 3 years ago when everything stopped and only 2 things remained in his mind. He then reveals that despair and hatred are the only reasons he continues to live. In his new video, he introduces himself as Ryu 7017, known for his escape from the unknown videos, and says his in-game name in Labyrinth is Ryuki. He apologizes and says that today's video is not about clearing dungeons, which surprises Linful. Ryuki then declares that from this moment on, he will reveal the truth he knows to everyone. He introduces himself as Ryuki, also known as Ryu 7017, the man behind the escape of an unknown from the Deep Sea videos. Ragnar watches the stream and comments that he looks more ordinary than she expected, while Ryuki clarifies that he's literally an unknown. He admits it's hard to believe an unknown without an account could enter the game Labyrinth. To get an account, you need a silver rank or higher to pass an exam or have a guild's recommendation, but he assures everyone that he is absolutely a bottom-tier unknown. He then says it doesn't matter if they don't believe him or suspect him of cheating, because as for the account, he just got lucky. Linful watches the video as Ryuki declares he doesn't care what people say. The reason he became an unknown is because he was framed. He knows no one would believe him anyway, and the real reason he's making this video is something else. He then directly addresses Linful and the members of the Linza Guild, knowing they're watching, and he asks if they all remember how pathetic he looked when he fell into the abyss. He fought his way out of a terrible place to get back here, and he warns them to just wait a little longer because now it's their turn. Elsewhere, a mysterious figure comments that it seems an enemy of Linza has appeared. Two voices note the video's view count and confirm this is the guy they talked about, who's now under surveillance. A mysterious figure reveals that he used to work for Linza and that his records were erased, likely by Gabriel to protect Linful. Two voices instruct him to keep an eye on Linful Darius, an important candidate, though he considers them pathetic. He then wonders what to do since Linza won't be able to ignore Ryu 7017 either. The voices prefer to stay out of it for now and decide to just keep watching. He agrees to maintain surveillance, but warns he might act on his own. The voices call him uncooperative and lead the conversation. The mysterious figure then decides he'll also do as he pleases. At a press conference, Gabriel Darius is questioned about the Linza Guild's connection to the recent hot topic, Ryu 7017. He confirms they were once part of the guild, but were expelled and now have no connection. A reporter then asks if it's true that Linza falsely accused them. Gabriel replies that this is completely baseless. The reporter continues, mentioning rumors of collusion with Raisha, the developer of World of Phantasm. He explains the deal was supposedly to control the pace of content consumption by regulating dungeon completions. He then asks Gabriel, as the guild leader, for his position on the allegations. Gabriel dismisses all as slander and states they've already contacted Ryu 7017's associates and obtain their information. Gabriel Darius assures them that soon everything will be set right. A mysterious figure watches the broadcast as he announces strong legal action against Ryu 7017 for spreading rumors. Ryuki arrives at a location and Shizuki comments that the whole world is talking about him and that his celebrity has graced her establishment. He says he couldn't care less and asks about her body, which doesn't match her old man's voice. She replies that she likes this voice and that it's one of the benefits of a full-body prosthesis. He ignores her answer and asks to see the mod, but she says what he saw last time is all there is. The young man doesn't believe her and reminds her that she mentioned a request to test those who sought the mod. He then asks if that means she has connections to the creator. Shizuki asks if he wants to deal directly with the creator because if the guinea pig shows up on his own, she can't refuse. She then smiles, looking pleased with how the conversation is going. She hands him a disc, explaining that if he can use it correctly, they will find him. He takes the disc and comments that the creators seem pretty important. Yegon analyzes the object and identifies it as Mod Mind's Eye, which interferes with the visual system to obtain information. Ryuki says he doesn't care about the risks of a high-spec mod, but he doesn't like being tested. He gets ready to leave and mentions one last thing, which makes Shizuki curious about what he's carrying in the bag. He shows the full bag, explaining they are boss-level magic stones he collected in the dungeons. He then asks Shizuki to calculate the value with the mod's bonus, and she thanks him and tells him to come back anytime. Out on the street, he comments to Yegon about the good profit he made, and the AI asks if he's going to try his luck with random boxes. But he replies that he still needs to meet one more person, which shocks Yegon at his master's unsocial life. A hand then waves at them from a distance. A young man approaches and greets him, but Ryuki just comments that he arrived earlier than expected. Yegon wonders since when his master has had friends, realizing he misjudged the person. The young man asks how Ryuka has been, leaving the AI completely bewildered. He continues to stare at the newcomer in silence. In a memory from the past, a hand points to a large, glowing tree on the city's horizon. A young Garcia points enthusiastically in the same direction. Next to a young Ryuki, he says his friend is right. Back in the present, he places a hand on Ryuki's shoulder, who finally says it really has been a while, Garcia. Garcia then invites him to talk for a bit. He agrees to talk, but his hand clenches into a tight fist, expressing his tension. Garcia comments that he's pretty laid back and should have contacted him sooner. He says he still feels terrible about what happened 3 years ago and that he had no choice at the time. Helping an unknown wasn't a simple matter back then. He then suggests they go somewhere more private to apologize properly, and Ryuki agrees. With a smile, Ryuki agrees, mentioning there are too many prying eyes around. Garcia apologizes sincerely once more. He bows and says he's sorry for what happened 3 years ago. Ryuki questions if an apology like that has any meaning now. Then he asks what Garcia really came to apologize for. Garcia reveals he has a plan to help him get back to bronze rank. He guarantees it's possible if Ryuki follows his plan, but the return won't be immediate. A memory begins with Ryuki calling Garcia's name on a rainy night, asking what he said. He begs for help, explaining there's only 1 week left until his mother's surgery. Ryuki gets on his knees and swears he'll pay him back if he lends him the money for the surgery. But Garcia pushes him away, telling him he's touching him with dirty hands. He tells the unknown to know his place and get lost. Lying on the ground in the rain, Ryuki calls out for his mother. He then states that he has to get the money for her surgery. Back in the present, Ryuki considers that this might actually be a good thing. The hospital bills and surgery costs are far more than an unknown could ever afford. In the memory, a voice orders Ryuki to leave, as this is no place for an unknown. The words to know his place and get lost echo in his mind. Back at the cafe, Ryuki abruptly stands up from the table. He then turns to Garcia, offering some advice for old time's sake. No one would believe his cheap act. Ryuki reveals he easily found out about his affiliation with the game developer Activity, a subsidiary of Leisha. He questions what kind of support Garcia could offer, since his labyrinth is failing miserably. Ryuki turns to leave, stating he doesn't need his support anymore, but Garcia threatens him, saying he'll hand over his information to Linza. He reminds him of Gabriel Darius, the master of the Linza Guild and Linfol's older brother. Ryuki recalls the name Gabriel when he presented him with a strategy guide. In a flashback, Gabriel praises the guide, being described as the guild's former ace and absolute leader, known as the Cold Serpent. He says he'll be watching for his next strategy. Garcia advises him to sit down while Gabriel still considers him human. Ryuki remains silent with a serious expression. Garcia changes his posture and decides to get straight to business, as he explains that Ryuki's channel will be a billboard for his company. Ryuki snatches the card from Garcia's hand. Ryuki suddenly confronts him, telling Garcia that this item is dangerous. Ryuki asks if he has any last requests. Ryuki shoves him hard across the cafe, telling him to get out. He leaves, saying they should never see each other again, leaving Garcia on the floor. Garcia warns that the target is escaping. He yells to get him quickly, as armed men tell Ryuki to stop. One of the men is neutralized by Ryuki as he tries to tell him to surrender peacefully. The men shout that the target is getting away as they chase Ryuki down the street. They follow him into a dead-end alley but wonder where he went. On top of a building, Ryuki watches his pursuers, having used a skill to escape. He realizes that Gabriel Darius's approach was much more aggressive than expected. Ligon detects his rising stress levels and asks if something is bothering him, but Ryuki denies it, stating that things are becoming clearer to him. He now knows what to do next and decides to return to the world of Phantasm. Elsewhere, Gabriel questions Garcia about how he repays the trust placed in him. Garcia apologizes for the disappointment and tries to offer information about Ryuki, but Gabriel cuts him off, saying the more he talks, the more disappointed he becomes. He asks if Garcia thinks he wouldn't already know basic information about someone who once belonged to Linza. Garcia then suggests the unknown probably got his account creation ticket from a random box. He begs for one more chance to investigate, while Gabriel reflects that all registered tickets were publicly auctioned. The people who bought the tickets at auction don't fit the profile. Gabriel concludes that Ryuki must have a benefactor, as he was expecting information about his associates. Garcia defends himself, questioning how he could know about the associates of someone who's been an unknown for years. Gabriel states he's wasted his time talking to someone who would betray an unknown for a quick profit. Gabriel's words echo in Garcia's mind. Enraged, he lunges at Gabriel. One of Gabriel's men quickly stops him. The guard pins him to the floor, neutralizing the threat. Gabriel approaches, declaring that a bronze daring to attack a gold is a serious offense. He warns him there's no hope of escape, as there are witnesses. The guard holds him down firmly. With Garcia pressed to the floor, Gabriel says that while this would normally result in a severe punishment, he will show mercy. He then sentences Garcia to become an unknown. Garcia begs the guild master for one more chance. He screams desperately that he is not an unknown. The guards drag him out of the place as Gabriel watches. Gabriel reflects that Ryuki was, at best, a decent analyst, but that was it. He didn't compare to Linful, so it was an obvious choice, but something made him special. A vision showed Ryuki before an immense figure and a circular pattern. Then Gabriel decides he will uncover the secret of his account by any means necessary. Ryuki returns to the world of Phantasm, arriving in a village. A flash of energy marks his arrival in the middle of the square. He comments that he likes this village, while Yahello asks when he'll roll the random box. Yahello questions why he's wandering around, but Ryuki explains that the number of online players is important. He states that he needs witnesses for what's about to happen. His view count rises quickly. With so much attention, he knows they'll have to act. The target is Linza, the top guild in the world of Phantasm, and its ace Linful. Ryuki then removes his helmet and prepares to set the bait and begin. A nearby player points in his direction, getting his friend's attention. Soon, a small crowd forms, recognizing him as the unknown player everyone's talking about. Lagon's system interface displays his 92 tickets and random box points. He accumulated the tickets through bonuses, daily quests, and dungeon achievements. So Ryuki decides to start with a 10-item roll. He doesn't get any rare items, receiving only common rewards. After Lagon comments on the probability, Ryuki decides to use all his remaining Lagon tickets. The result is piles of useless items, with nothing of value in sight. Even with a 3.6% chance, he gets nothing. But Wagon encourages him not to give up. Ryuki sits among the items, saying it's fine since he didn't have high hopes. Then he reveals his 5 guaranteed SR tickets. stating that the real round starts now. He opens the first SR random box. Inside is a necklace made from a phoenix feather that allows for a one-time resurrection. Considering a one-time resurrection is a good start, he believes it will be useful. Ryuki then moves on to the next ticket. As the box opens, he hopes for a weapon or a skill, believing he's hit the jackpot. But the revealed item is an SR rank magic toothbrush. Egon congratulates him on finally getting an SR rank toothbrush after so many others. He asks if the item has any hidden function, and Wygon explains that it can be used in the real world. Its only function is to prevent cavities and work without electricity. Ryuki yells that it's useless and gestures at Wygon with the brush. With 3 tickets left, he decides to use them all at once to increase his chances. He decides to use all his tickets at once. Ryuki hopes to get at least 1 weapon with his last chances. Suddenly, he looks at the result. He questions how it makes sense to get 3 duplicate gunblades. Laughing, he falls to his knees, believing it's all over. In the crowd, 2 players wonder what he's doing and if they should report him to Linza. Egon then says that since he's had his fun, he'll share some good news. After obtaining multiple SR rank items, he has unlocked the combination system. There are other locked systems, but Wygon can't reveal the conditions beforehand. Egon confesses he couldn't resist seeing him in despair, and Ryuki threatens to turn him into a can. He then confirms that the combination system has been unlocked. With this, he realizes that at least the duplicate items now have a purpose. The item combination begins with the gunblade as the main target. The result of the fusion is a new, enhanced gunblade. He holds the weapon with its improved performance and wonders if there's a limit to how many times he can combine it. The combination screen reveals that it's possible to enhance the weapon even further. Ryuki raises the gunblade and starts the next fusion. The weapon transforms into a new SR rank gunblade, YGG, with cylinders that compress energy. He admires the creation, while Wygon comments that his master's mental health is becoming a concern. Then, he decides to take care of the remaining skills and performs an enhancement on his parry. He considers combining parry with sword mastery, and the system presents 3 possible random outcomes. Ryuki asks why the result is random, but Wygon claims that's the fun of it. Egon encourages him to aim for the ++ grade skill, explaining that combinations can enhance or create new skills. After asking the probability and hearing it's about 2%, Ryuki considers himself a fool for asking. He decides to risk it anyway, and the system grants him the SR plus Sword Saint skill. Although it's not ++, he notices the new skill combines the old ones, but the proficiency levels have dropped. Egon informs him that the resulting level is also random. With a smile, Ryuki says that's all for now. He then turns to Wygon and suggests that since he's just standing there, they could run some tests. Unexpectedly, a figure emerges from behind, threatening him with a blade and asking if he's Ryu 7017. Ryuki asks if Linza sent him, but the attacker states that he's the one who will be asking the questions. The man then attacks him, and Ryuki questions the action in a safe zone. In front of the crowd, he stumbles back as the attacker questions his concern for the game's rules. The masked man explains that the rule only prevents permanent defeat, not dealing damage to players. He recognizes this as the Linza Guild's preferred method and asks why he's wearing a mask. His attacker strikes again, questioning if he didn't start this confrontation right after declaring war. He warns him not to expect peace from now on, as they will follow him wherever he goes. Struck by the attack, Ryuki begins to laugh. He continues to laugh on the ground, and the masked man asks what he's laughing at. Ryuki finds it hilarious that the world of Phantasm is practically Linza's property, allowing them to act with impunity. The attacker prepares for the next blow, saying he'll put an end to that laughter. But Ryuki uses his skill to dodge the blow at the last second. Then he uses Flash Step to close the distance and point his sword at the attacker. Ryuki stares him down and simply says, 3 times. That was the number of times he attacked first, which would be enough to create the scene of a player being confronted by a powerful guild. The attacker asks what he's talking about as Ryuki announces that it's now his turn to strike back, moving in for the counterattack. The crowd reacts with shock and disapproval at what's happening. He begs him to wait, but is struck by the blade. Ryuki asks him why he's pretending to be weak, reminding him that he promised to follow him to the end. He asks if he can feel the impact, mentioning that he felt the effects before too, since in the world of Phantasm, defense reduces damage. But Ryuki reveals that his attacks don't follow that system, and the masked man despairs as he realizes he can't log out. Egon confirms that the logout signal has been blocked, explaining that the aggressor will feel the continuous effects of each blow. He says the aggressor should be familiar with the situation, as it's what he and his people have been doing for a long time. Egon approaches his master. Suddenly, several other masked players surround the area. One of them addresses Ryu 7017, gets straight to the point. He demands that Ryuki leave the world of Phantasm, saying it would be ideal if he stopped being a player altogether. Ryuki calls him generous for acting like he's doing him a huge favor, questioning if they weren't the ones who provoked him first. The original attacker remains immobilized on the ground. The newcomer comments that he's being too harsh and that he hadn't heard he was so dangerous, but Ryuki just tells him to back off. He refuses, stating he's more curious about that gun sword, which certainly doesn't exist in the world of Phantasm. The masked man asks how he brought the weapon to this place. Ryuki offers to tell him if he takes off his mask, but the other man knows that's not going to happen. The man says he should have exploited the bug quietly, but instead chose to create unnecessary trouble. He regrets it, but states that Ryuki's escape plan ends here. Then the other masked players charge all at once. Ryuki responds with parries. The blow hits several of the attackers at the same time. The leader appears behind him, saying that he's fast, but he's reached his limit. Ryuki activates his skill and counterattacks the leader. The man blocks the attack, questioning how a player who hasn't even reached the tower is already using that technique. He notes that using such techniques recklessly at this stage consumes a lot of resources. He concludes that Ryuki is just a beginner who got lucky with a bug. The leader advances again, mocking the technique's weakness, but Ryuki defends himself with his gunsword. He blocks the next blow and asks if the attacker thought that was an aura. The blow sends him flying backward. He stands his ground as the man on the floor declares it's impossible. The leader wonders if this could be another skill from a different game's labyrinth and considers waiting for the effect to wear off. Ryuki asks if he hasn't realized the situation yet, warning that the longer it takes, the worse it will get. He then reveals that his skill doesn't consume his resources. He claims he doesn't mind dragging out the fight as it gives him more time to practice. Ryuki explains that so far he's only fought monsters and needs to practice against real people. The crowd of players watches the scene. One of the spectators covers her face. One of the masked men falls to the ground, defeated. The leader shouts not to let him hit them, as he's ignoring their defenses. He orders all units to prepare for a group attack. Ryuki watches them on the ground and praises their great performance. He recognizes the signature weapon of the dual-wielding swordsman, Cassius. Ryuki asks if it doesn't bother him to ruin his image as a gentlemanly mage, who even has a fan club. Cassius shouts that he'll immobilize him and prepares a skill. Then, chains erupt from the ground and bind Ryuki. He orders them to attack from a distance with area of effect strikes, no physical projectiles. Multiple energy attacks are launched in his direction. Cassius explains that they've already analyzed the properties of the parry. If the attack isn't solid, he won't be able to counterattack. A large energy explosion hits the spot where he was, but the chains break and he emerges unscathed as expected. His SR Plus rank skill lives up to its grade, as it can deal damage even without being a physical attack. He comments that it's a bit disappointing, since now all he needs to do is swing his weapon. Cassius tries to order the units to attack once more, but is interrupted. Suddenly, he falls to the ground, causing his subordinates to scream for their boss. Ryuki asks if this is the first time he's been hit, thinking that taking down a boss in one hit is no big deal. The other masked men wonder if that weapon is a type that shouldn't exist in the world of Phantasm. They then realize that the weapon is a pistol. Against large or numerous monsters, the weapon is for crowd control, but against other players, it's a different story. Firearms don't exist in the world of Phantasm, so Ryuki asks why they're hesitating. Since they were the ones who attacked him first, he warns that they should be prepared to be defeated. He then asks if they should be ready for that. Elsewhere, a figure watches the broadcast and wonders what that is, questioning if it can even be called a bug. The figure notes that things are getting more and more interesting. One of the masked men drops his sword to the ground. Egon analyzes that the enemies rely on their stats to fight, making their movements inefficient compared to his master's style. All the attackers are down, and Lagon comments that he has blocked their exit, preventing them from escaping. Ryuki crouches beside Cassius, assuming that as high-ranking members they must have some kind of mental protection. Suddenly, an intense light shines from above, catching his attention. A huge wave of energy forces him to jump back. He recovers and recognizes the skill he's seen countless times in videos. It's one of the few long-range techniques in the game obtained by mastering spear proficiency. A meteor shower is conjured, raining down directly on him. Under the imminent attack, Ryuki braces himself for what's to come. He then activates a transfer stone to escape. He vanishes completely from the village square. The crowd is confused by what happened, wondering if it was Linz's doing. On the ground, Cassius realizes his superiors are getting personally involved. The meteor shower hits Ryuki in a rocky, desolate area. He gets up and faces his new opponent. Linful Darius approaches, stating he'd rather not have spectators for this. The vice leader of the Linza Guild, Meteor Linful Darius, says he couldn't ignore the call he made. Linful Darius asks if he's ready for the pain he's brought upon himself. Egon warns that his heart rate is skyrocketing, while Rebke states he's been waiting for this moment. He then asks Linful a single question, wanting to know if he remembers him. Linful explains that he came in person because he doesn't know him, and thought he might remember something by seeing him up close, but he claims nothing comes to mind and asks if Ryuki is sure he holds a grudge against him. Ryuki says he ruined his life and questions if he truly remembers nothing. Linful pretends to remember, mentioning the name Ryuki. He then reveals with a smile that he still doesn't know who he is. Linful asks if that bothers him and if he thought throwing a tantrum would change anything. He accuses him of blaming others for his own misery as he gathers energy in his spear. With his weapon in hand, he tells Ryuki not to disappoint him too much. Ryuki replies not to worry as he has no intention of holding back against someone like him. Both prepare for combat and charge at each other. Linful concentrates energy in his staff and Ryuki braces for impact. A massive attack is launched directly at him. A pillar of energy descends upon him with incredible speed. The energy explodes, creating a crater and kicking up debris all over the area. Linful questions if he actually dodged the attack. Ryuki is dragged back, creating a long trail of destruction, but Linful admits it wasn't bad for a nobody. The power behind the blows forces him to plant his feet firmly on the ground. Linful invites him to continue, and Ryuki blocks the first of a new series of attacks. The two exchange high-speed blows, their weapons clashing repeatedly. He struggles to parry the high-speed attacks, managing to dodge just barely. A powerful blow from Linful forces him to his knees, even with his block. Linful says he might need to re-evaluate him, and Ryuki questions what he means by that. He explains that this is for entertainment, since people used to play games just for fun. Ryuki defends himself with his weapon and says he'll give him some free tips. Linful strikes Ryuki squarely as he finishes the sentence, saying they are tips from someone with real talent. Linful spins the spear in his hand and encourages him to do his best. He then raises his staff and prepares to use the meteor strike skill, yelling for him to go for the high score. The massive attack hits the ground, creating a huge explosion of energy. Ryuki manages to block the blow, feeling the shock in his wrist, but something unexpected happens. He can barely hold on, but the parry works. The successful block repels Linful's attack, sending him flying backward. When the parry works, it creates an opening, and that's his chance to strike. He lunges forward to counterattack. Linful recovers and blocks the blow with his spear. He stumbles back from the impact of the counterattack. Ryuki realizes the unstable counterattack has more weight to it than the Dark Knight's. Linful acknowledges the skill as an interesting choice, since it's not found in the world of Phantasm. He decides to pick up the pace a bit and asks if Ryuki can keep up. They exchange blows again, and Ryuki knows the parry should have a stun effect. He wonders if Linful's quick recovery is due to his weapon. Ryuki recalls the data he reviewed as an analyst. Linful comments that he's holding up better than expected and challenges him to keep up now that he's speeding up. He remembers that the Starlight Spear accelerates with each strike, but believes he can last longer with his intuition and parries. The two clash in a powerful clash of blades. This is his last chance, and he needs to aim for a critical hit. Suddenly, he's hit. Linful strikes him with a decisive blow, saying it's a shame as with just 3 more seconds he would have set a new record. He concludes that this one isn't worth remembering either, as it was only slightly thrilling. With a single blow, he sends Ryuki flying. Linful finds him disappointing and asks if he really thought he could face him with those skills. He then informs him that, by the way, he can't be defeated here even if he wanted to be. The location is considered a safe zone by the game's faulty system, just like the village where he faced Cassius. Linful approaches, saying that if he doesn't want to suffer anymore, he should start talking, and asks if someone is backing him. But Ryuki tells him to shut up and asks why he doesn't just ask Cynthia, if he's so curious. Linful reacts upon hearing Cynthia's name. He grabs him, demanding to know where that girl is. With a smirk, Ryuki asks if she betrayed him too. Linful demands he stop spouting nonsense and answer, but Ryuki just tells him to be quiet. His intuition has never been stronger as he holds a small item in his hand. While Linful keeps demanding to know where she is, Ryuki activates a small flash bomb. An intense flash of light forces Linful to shield his eyes. He recovers and questions if he really thinks he can defeat him with a device like that. Ryuki calls him ridiculous for thinking he'd be manipulated, asking why he'd need help to finish someone like him. Linful then accepts his choice not to talk and warns him not to regret it. With his hand on his weapon, Ryuki states that from now on he will never forget him. He gets ready, saying that he's now coming at him with 50% of his power. Ryuki announces he'll now face him using only 50% of his power. Egon calls him master, questioning the decision. He asks if Ryuki really thinks he has the luxury of showing off like that. Egon advises him not to have any regrets, but Ryuki just asks what regret even is. Then Ryuki declares he has already discarded such useless emotions. Calling him an arrogant fool, Linful advances to attack. He reads the attacks with his intuition, buying time with parries. He then uses a quick step to close the distance, but Linful counters with a kick that connects. Ryuki is thrown back, realizing his opponent switched to a kick in a split second. The tip of Linful's spear lunges straight at him, but Ryuki manages to block the attack at the last second. With a spin, Linful throws him away, saying he's lucky they're in a PK-free zone. He lands holding his arm, realizing the damage was serious. Linful adds that fighting in the city would get him chewed out by the boss, so this is the perfect spot. Planting his feet firmly, Ryuki just tells him to shut up. Ryuki advances with a cry of fury while a shadowy figure appears in the distance. Linful turns his head and comments that he already warned him. Then he blocks the strike, declaring that it's not going to happen. He then asks if Ryuki thinks he can handle the next attack. Linful activates his skill Meteor Shower and attacks from above. Ryuki falls to the ground after being hit. Linful asks if he's getting slower and if that's all he's got. Kneeling, Ryuki remarks he should have known the outcome, questioning if an elite ace would be treated kindly. He demands that Ryuki fight harder, stating this is the perfect moment for his revenge. But then Linful calls him a pathetic weakling, saying this has gotten boring. He grabs him by the collar of his armor. Next, he throws him into the air. Linful activates Meteor Shower again, saying it's a waste to end it all so soon. He jumps into the air, preparing a downward attack. A huge column of energy descends on Ryuki as the skill Flash is activated. Linful observes the crater and says it was very disappointing. But then he gets a notification and wonders if it's the boss. The message from Gabriel Darius orders him to stop the fight and return immediately. Linful laments that he's going to get chewed out again. From the middle of the dust, Ryuki yells for him to wait. Linful turns, shocked his attack didn't pierce the armor. He claims the impact alone should have defeated him. While Ryukai leans on his sword to get up, he concludes that this could not be overcome with willpower alone. Egon explains that the sensitivity control adjusts sensory perception, but at the minimum level of 50%, his movements also become slower. The robotic unit asks if he enjoys feeling the pain from the hits, but Ryuki says he had no other choice to stand a chance. He then declares that he just needs to keep fighting back. Linful says he must have used some kind of glitch, but Ryuki just asks if he's afraid of Gabriel Darius. The question leaves him speechless. With a hand over the impact point, Ryuki asks if he hit a nerve. He then stands, stating it's obvious this was a solo act. Ryuki says that by now Gabriel is probably furious as he reads a rusty dagger. Linful smiles and says he pulled it off, admitting that even though he was desperate, he got what he wanted. A dagger hits Linful's neck. Ryuki asks if he's already complaining over a single hit, saying Linful underestimated him. Clutching the spot, Linful says it's to be expected for his first time feeling pain, since his attack bypasses armor rules. He presses his hand against the wound. Linful calls him a wretch. Ryuki asks if he's alright since he can still make noise after a hit to the neck. He then taunts him to stop complaining and come fight him. Linful tells him to shut up and lunges with a downward strike, but Ryuki dodges and parries the attack. Linful wonders how he's reading his movements, despite being at a disadvantage. Ryuki reveals that as an analyst, he studied and memorized all of Linful's skill patterns and habits. Ryuki strikes Linful's leg, stating that since Linful has never felt such pain, he'll have the advantage the moment his concentration breaks. Linful decides he needs to end the fight quickly. He declares he'll put everything into his next strike. Multiple skills activate at once: Sonic Lance, Monstrous Strength, and Double Attack. He states that his Awakening skill, used only for hunting tower bosses, will defeat him once and for all. Linful prepares to deliver his attack as the skill's Celestial Meteor Strike is activated. Ryuki recognizes the technique as the Spear of Invincibility. He decides he just has to endure it. As long as he stays in the PK-free zone, he'll be safe. His opponent rushes toward him. Linful questions how he intends to dodge at that slow pace, but Ryuki appears by his side. He uses a wooden dummy and a rusty gear, leaving his opponent confused. Ryuki decides that if he can't avoid the attack, he will minimize the damage and knockback in any way he can. Then he summons a series of random items, and Linful wonders if he really thinks he can block the attack with that junk. With a cry of fury, Linful delivers the final blow. The spear strikes Ryuki's chest with full force. A large explosion of energy occurs at the point of impact. After the smoke clears, Linful calls him an annoying creature. He comments that Ryuki managed to avoid a direct hit, but states there's no way he can win with what he has left. Holding the spear that hit him, Ryuki tells himself that he finally managed to get this far. Linful gets angry that he damaged his weapon, calling him a persistent pest who just won't give up. Holding the weapon, Ryuki asks if Linful wants to see something fun, but he just yells for him to let go. He explains that the SSR he got at the beginning, which he tested with Serial's wings, is neither a skill nor an item. Linful stares at him and asks what he's doing. Ryuki's hands glow around the weapon, and Linful wonders what is happening to his spear. He then screams in panic, questioning what that is on his status window. With a smile, Ryuki reveals the power that materializes in his hand, Delete. The Spear of Light vanishes completely. Linful wonders what happened, recognizing his Starlight Spear. He then notices the unique item has disappeared from his inventory and wonders how that's possible. Linful concludes his opponent must be using some kind of trick or illusion technique. A shot hits him. As he backs away, he hears Ryuki say he was aiming for the center, praising his instant reaction. Linful touches the spot where he was hit and demands to know what he did to his weapon. Ryuki explains that the weapon is gone as he deleted its data. He reveals this is the delete power of the Egon system. Linful pulls himself together, saying he'll defeat him anyway. He then declares that a single weapon is more than enough to finish him. Ryuki challenges him to try and starts running away. Linful gives chase, yelling that he won't let him escape. He notices something, wondering what's going on. An explosion goes off, caused by a trap on the ground. Linful is nearly hit by the blast, questioning what that was. Then, a shot hits him dead on. He leans on his weapon to keep from falling, as Ryuki advises him to stay put. Ryuki then reveals that he's set up a bunch of traps all around them. Linful dismisses the warning as foolish and steps on one of the traps. With a smile, Ryuki asks if they really thought he didn't know this place. Linful just glares at him furiously. Ryuki explains that he knew every move he would make, having planned everything since he made his declaration. He knew this was a place where the Linza Guild plays dirty and figured he'd be lured here. That's why he planted a few surprises here in advance. He thanks Linful for falling into his trap and promises to stay until the end to return the favor. Linful just grits his teeth at the taunt. Then he yells that it's all nonsense and charges forward to attack. Another trap explodes right in his path. Amidst the dust, he complains that his opponent dodges everything and that the smoke is clouding his vision. Shouting for his opponent to go down, Linful leaps and attacks the figure on the ground. He realizes something as he strikes the target. His attack actually hit a decoy. Then a countdown begins. To Linful's surprise, Ryuki grabs his weapon and it begins to shatter. The spear shatters completely, and Ryuki asks if he's starting to feel the effect. Linful questions if the Starlight Spear is really gone, as Ryuki's weapon powers up. Then Ryuki fires a powerful attack at Linful. Defeated, Linful falls to the ground, vowing to make him pay one day, and tries to log out. But the logout system fails, leaving him confused about what happened. He screams, questioning why the logout isn't working, and is neutralized by a final blow. Yigun informs him that logout has been disabled, and Ryuki asks if the Great Ace of Linza isn't ashamed of running away. Ryuki confronts him up close and calls him by his full name, Linful Darius. He then asks if Linful remembers an analyst from the Linza Guild named Ryuki. Linful yells back that he'd never remember someone like him. Ryuki asks if he'll still not remember, even after he's no longer a player, leaving Linful speechless. He reminds him that only one account is allowed per person, and if he loses it for any reason, he'll never get another one. Then Ryuki reveals he was wondering if his delete power could also erase account data. He states that from this moment on, Linful will never forget him, while the other begs him to stop. Ryuki begins a countdown at 5, and Linful pleads with him not to do it. The count continues to 4, with Linful desperately screaming for him to stop. At 3, a scene shows Gabriel Darius in his office, gathering information on Rue 7017. On the count of 2, Gabriel advises Linful not to act recklessly, as this time was different. Reaching 1, Linful just tells him to stop talking. The countdown finally hits 0. Linful screams as his body begins to fragment. His body disintegrates completely. Egon states that it's over and congratulates him, but he wonders if it's really finished. He then declares that this was just the beginning. He states this is only the beginning, as there are still many others he needs to pay back. Elsewhere, a mysterious person draws a dagger. As Ryuki mentions the Linza Guild and Gabriel Darius, suddenly something is thrown at high speed towards Ryuki. A dagger nearly hits him. He looks at the weapon, and Wigon warns him to be careful. Ryuki is transported to a different space, and Wigon asks if he's okay, but he senses this isn't a spatial transfer. The mysterious figure appears behind him, saying it's been a while, and calls him by his name. A hooded figure emerges in front of him, and he asks who it is. The person introduces herself as Azia from the GAES Guild, and Ryuki finds it strange since he's never seen her before. She explains that Azia is her real name, but she has used another name in the past. Then the figure starts to remove her hood. She says he'd probably know her better by that other name. Cynthia reveals herself, saying she never thought they'd meet again, and calls him Ryuki. Ryuki stammers her name, surprised by the reunion. A brief memory of Cynthia smiling flashes in his mind, followed by another of her standing next to Linful. He questions if it's really Cynthia standing there. She confirms that Cynthia was an alias and her real name is Azia. Ryuki starts to laugh uncontrollably. He then says he doesn't care what her real name is. Because of her scheme, he was kicked out of the guild, became a nobody, and lost everything. And yet she herself came back, and he can only think of one reason why. He then asks if she came prepared for a confrontation. Cynthia reveals she tried to find out what happened to him and never imagined he'd become a player. She explains that thinking about how to surpass him, Linful, and the others from Linza was what kept her going. And if it weren't for that goal, she would have been defeated exactly as he expected. Cynthia faces him with a serious expression. He demands she explain why she's there, stating he can barely stop himself from taking her down on the spot. Cynthia says 3 years have passed and he's changed a lot, so she gets straight to the point and asks him to forget his revenge against Linza. With a smile, Ryuki asks her to repeat what she just said. She advises him to live quietly, so Linza will stop tracking him, asking him to think of his family, at least for his mother's sake. Then Cynthia mentions she heard that very day that his mother passed away and apologizes for it. Ryuki's expression changes completely. He draws his weapon, confirming she really came to be stopped, and promises he'll grant her wish. Then he lunges forward, shouting that he's going to end this right now. Cynthia remains motionless as he closes in to attack. He strikes with his weapon, but she manages to block the attack. With a lunge, she prepares to grab the dagger. Cynthia moves past him, and he questions her strength and the dagger. She then lunges forward and grabs the dagger. With a quick move, Ryuki manages to strike Cynthia's hand, neutralizing her. Ryuki readies himself and attacks with his weapon from above. He unleashes a wide, horizontal strike against her. He states she didn't even come close and questions if that's all she's got, realizing her feelings ran deep. Cynthia's figure flickers and her body begins to fall apart. Garcia comments that taking down Linful wasn't just luck and says goodbye as her body disintegrates. Ryuki points his weapon, questioning the situation. She says she didn't come for a decisive battle and never thought he would actually defeat Linful. Egon informs its master that the figure isn't real, explaining that a data transmission occurred when he touched the dagger. The AI comments that he's shocked to see the real thing, as this is the appearance of an artificial bug. Ryuki says he doesn't care and that in the end he can't defeat her now. Cynthia then declares that taking down Linza is her job. She asks if he'll be able to handle the situation when Linful returns, and he questions the mention of the name. She states she won't give up on her revenge and doesn't care about the consequences. Cynthia warns him he'll regret it, but Ryuki replies that he'll never see Linful in the game again. He reveals that he completely deleted Linful's account and that, in the end, he was crying and screaming. He tells her to shut up and wait because soon her fate will be the same. Back in the desert, he looks at his own hands and admits she got him. He reflects that the bug completely neutralized him and that he would have been defeated if Azia had wanted to. But the most shocking part was the suspicious dagger, which he should have dodged instead of grabbing. He didn't sense any danger from her and decides he'll need an ally in information. He then turns to Weigang and asks if that thing is ready yet. The AI confirms it's tracking the data and connecting the call, and Ryuki speaks to the mod creator. A teddy bear avatar appears on a screen, completely surprised. He asks if the creator thought he wouldn't notice the hack in his vision through the mod he bought at Shuzuki's shop. The bear realizes he was already in his sights and tries to disconnect. Ryuki says it's useless, asking if he didn't see how he stopped Cassius and Linful from logging out. The avatar quickly apologizes, insisting he meant no harm. He then asks if he thought he wouldn't be bothered by being tested and spied on. Ryuki says he knows Shuzuki and proposes they meet face to face. He orders him to go to Shuzuki's shop the next night at 8, or he'll have all his data tracked and deleted. The avatar agrees to the meeting, but asks to ask just one question. He then asks if the signal lost during the fight against Linful was also Ryuki's doing. Garcia concludes that he needs to capture that guy one way or another, as the bug is dangerous. In response, he asks if he's in any position to ask questions and tells him to show up quietly if he doesn't want to meet the same end as Linful. The scene takes place outside the less than Shuzuki greater than curiosity shop. Inside the shop, Ryuki complains that he's on time, but the other person hasn't shown up yet. He wonders if the trade is still happening. Shuzuki asks what he's talking about. He then turns and claims the mod creator is already there, asking if Ryuki doesn't see him. Ryuki grabs him by the collar, saying he didn't come here for games, and threatens him if he's hiding someone. A voice suddenly says it's here, leaving Ryuki confused. A teddy bear appears and introduces itself as the mod creator, commenting that it's an embarrassing way to meet. He grabs the bear tightly, finding the situation unbelievable. He asks if the other guy thinks he's easy to fool. The bear complains that it hurts and it's being crushed, but Ryuki tells it to cut the nonsense, as his patience is running out. Suddenly, Shuzuki's body falls lifeless to the floor. Ryuki demands to know what's happening. The bear explains it thought it would be faster to show than to tell by moving its consciousness. The bear explains that the one speaking before was the mod creator, and the one speaking now is Shuzuki. It asks to be let go so they can negotiate. He notices the voice and tone have changed to Shuzuki's and asks what that is on the floor. Egon confirms it's the same person, explaining that he seems to use multiple bodies and adjust his personality programming. Ryuki is stunned by his ability to alter his own personality. The bear praises his observation for noticing so quickly. The bear congratulates him for taking down Linful and asks about the skill he used, making Ryuki notice the change in voice. He refuses to answer and instead demands to know who is speaking to him. The voice says Shuzuki will explain, but advises him to be careful with his delete skill. Ryuki replies that it's already too late. Egon then reports that the video editing is finished and the full battle against Linful has been posted. The mod creator is shocked and warns him that the entire Linza guild will now be after him. With a smile, Ryuki says that's exactly what he wants. He wants them to fear an unknown they so foolishly underestimated. The bear laments that it's like talking to a brick wall and asks if he knows he's already being followed. As Ryuki asks about being followed, Shuzuki's body gets up and explains that 5555 doesn't like to talk about things outside his specialty. Shuzuki then tells him to check something first and activates a device. A projection of the area around the shop appears. He explains it's a live feed to detect nearby targets. The feed shows a group called Black Cobra 47 meters away. Ryuki wonders if they're still not over what happened, but Shuzuki claims they're just bait for the real supporters. Next, the image shows a second group called Iron Blood at the same distance. Ryuki asks what that's about. Shizuki informs him that they are a major crime syndicate operating in the underworld. Fortunately, they likely have no connection to Linza. He adds that their boss had to retire because of an incident, with rumors that Linza was behind it. Ryuki concludes they wouldn't side with the ones who ruined them and still demands to know what Shizuki really is. Since they've been discovered, Shizuki suggests they move to a more suitable place to talk. As they walk, he explains that all of his selves share the same goal and that the shop's basement connects to the underworld sewer system. Shizuki points the way and Weigon's scan detects no danger. He then heads down to the next area. Arriving in a warehouse, Ryuki asks where they are. Shizuki reveals this is where he keeps his best creations. Ryuki says he's not interested in the bodies and asks what he should call him, Shizuki or 5555. He replies that for now, he is Shizuki, but as a hacker, he is 5555. Before they proceed with the deal, Shizuki offers to explain who he is. Ryuki questions if he doesn't know who he is, asking if tampering with his personality caused some kind of split. He replies it's something like that and asks if Ryuki has ever heard of the 707 explosion incident. He says the incident was known as a plane crash with no survivors, but in reality there was one whose charred figure couldn't be identified. In the lab, the survivor was torn apart until someone turned him into a full-body android. Yahello comments that humans are trash and Ryuki asks if he was that survivor. He corrects him, saying we are, and explains that the accident fused countless memories. He continues, saying he doesn't know if they are souls or minds, only that he artificially controls these personalities. Because of that, he doesn't know himself. Ryuki decides to accept the explanation for now and asks what kind of deal he's looking for. Then Shizuki tosses a file in his direction. He catches it and sees it's labeled Linza Guild and Leisha Soft. Shizuki then declares that he wants to be part of his revenge. Meanwhile, the fight video is posted online with comments saying Linfo got completely wrecked. Others question if the so-called data deletion isn't fake. One viewer claims to have watched it and says it all looks like a fabrication. People call him a show-off newbie, mocking the idea of deletion in a game that doesn't allow such a thing. Far away, Linfo is sprawled among bottles, while the public wonders why the Linza Guild hasn't made a statement yet. He smashes a bottle on the floor. Sitting on the sofa, an account information check finds no data. He wonders if his account has disappeared. He grabs a bottle, muttering that he is Linfo, the ace of Linza, and curses his brother. Then he slams his hand on the floor and screams for his brother. Linfo begs for just one more chance. Gabriel Darius scolds him for ignoring his warning, fighting on his own and losing his account, questioning what kind of chance he expects. Linfo defends himself, saying he was caught by surprise. He demands a new account, promising to obey him from now on. He then yells that there must be a way, either by taking another player's account or getting an account creation pass. His brother calls him shockingly ignorant for an active player, saying it's embarrassing they're related. Gabriel reaffirms that the rule is one account per person. Once it's lost, you can't create another. Two men grab him from behind as his brother declares his time is up and asks if he wants to waste any more of it. As he's restrained, Linfo wonders if this is really his end, since even that unknown player got an account. He struggles, screaming that he'll handle everything himself and telling the men to get out of his way. Gabriel simply adjusts his glasses as he watches the scene. Linfo is thrown out of the building. One of the men says he's tired of cleaning up his messes and tells him not to come back. Lying on the sidewalk, he mutters that those scumbags didn't even have the guts to look him in the eye before. A man approaches and asks if he is Linfo Darius. He tells him to get lost if he's there to beg, saying not to make his mood any worse. Ruga then pulls out a knife and says he's here to help him. Linfo's expression changes as the man suggests he might need their strength. With a smile, he reveals a photo of Ryuki and invites him to hear his offer. The young man reads a document and asks if everything written there is true. Yagun finds the situation with the game's developers and administrators pathetic. Shizuki reveals a secret pact between the Linza Guild and Leisha Soft while taking an item from a box. He calls the pact to hinder progress in the gods game ridiculous, and the young man identifies Leisha Soft as the target. Ryuki questions if it's really worth facing a corporation that monopolizes the development of resources that sustain the world. But Shizuki states that they were once pioneers and are now just an obstacle blocking the world's progress. Ryuki says his frustration seems a bit hard to understand based on that alone, and Shizuki reveals he is the sole survivor of Incident 707. And he continues, explaining that what caused the plane incident back then was a game item from Yggdrasil. Shizuki concludes that Leisha Soft was behind that event, and he confirms he's almost certain of it. Ryuki then realizes the proposal goes beyond just stopping Linza and asks if they plan to shut down World of Phantasm itself. Shizuki questions the need for a game with so many problems, even if it provides more than half of society's resources. He claims that Leisha's new game titles are low quality, and that even the resources from their only successful one are slowly running out. Society may be stable now, but he questions if Radia can produce another hit in the next 5 or 10 years. Ryuki reflects that the Demon God's Tower remains unconquered, while the Linza Guild plans to dominate it, but Wolia's idea is to shut down the platform. Yagan encourages his master to proceed, as he finds it hard to tolerate the existence of such a problematic game. Shizuki says he will consider the matter, but reminds the young man of the reason for his visit. With a smile, Ryuki asks him to hand over all the mods. Going up the stairs, Nigun reports that he has checked the 13 mods and that the disguise mode seems useful. He holds a device, considers the exchange interesting, and asks if the device has investigated the incident mentioned by Wolia. Egon confirms that records of the incident exist, that there was only one survivor, but there is no proof that Wolia is that person. Emerging from a manhole, he agrees that people can't be trusted and asks if the path was through the alleys near the Entertainment District Hotel. He notes the location is far enough from Juchin Square to be safe, but he sees a man sitting on the ground. Approaching the fallen man, he wonders if the person is unwell, but confirms he is at least breathing. Yigon identifies that the man is under the influence of digital stimulants, something the young man has heard of. He guesses their popularity is due to being in the entertainment district and hears someone shout, "Over here." A group of men approaches the fallen man, with one of them complaining that the guy is being too much trouble. Yigon observes that they are wearing the same clothes as the people who were watching near Juchin Square, while the leader complains about being tricked. Hiding, Ryuki wonders if Wolia tricked him about the route being safe. The leader confronts the fallen man, saying it's impressive he ran all the way here after ditching their merchandise. Then he attacks him. The leader scolds the fallen man and orders his men to take him away. He asks his subordinate if he lost the target. The man apologizes, but the leader reassures him, saying the client only asked for surveillance for now and that Wolia is very cautious. Hiding, the young man overhears the mention of a client and the order to keep watching Juchin Square. The subordinate insists that just watching the building won't help them find them, but his superior tells him to just obey for now. The leader then asks if he understands what it means to put in effort, and the man immediately agrees. Yigan comments that Wolia didn't set a trap. The young man tells him to be quiet, as he doesn't want to cause unnecessary trouble. He then asks the device to guide him through the least crowded route possible. The young man walks towards a door. He opens the door. He looks inside the motel room. Upon entering the room, he wonders if it's just his imagination. He throws himself on the bed, saying he's exhausted. Lying down, he comments that after weeks in the god's game, he couldn't even remember the last time he lay down in the real world. He remains lying on the bed with his arms outstretched. Suddenly, a sword tries to strike Ryuki. The bed is sliced in half. Ryuki lunges forward and attacks the mysterious man with a blade at the same instant, but the intruder's body vanishes. He looks back with a smile and questions if the attacker used an Yggdrasil item. The intruder jumps out the window, but the young man shouts that he won't let him escape. He sees the enemy didn't get far and that he just needs to follow the trail he left to catch him. The device detects invisibility and the young man runs, stating that without his intuition, he wouldn't have even noticed. He sees no traps and notices the trail leads around the corner to the right. With a smile, he confirms the target is nearby. He states that continuing to run is a waste of time and tells the other to reveal his identity. The man asks who sent him, mentioning Black Cobra or Iron Blood. He then raises his sword, preparing an attack. A huge blow is launched and Ryuki dodges. The device comments that the weapon's power is impressive, but the young man knows the weapon is excellent. He tells his opponent that his swordsmanship doesn't match the sword's power and asks if that isn't his main weapon. Then he suggests the man put that item down first. Ryuki strikes his opponent's hand with his sword. The weapon falls to the ground. As the man's disguise fails, the young man says he'll now get a good look at his face. He recognizes the man and calls him the so-called former guild ace, trying to act like an adversary. Then he asks if it isn't pathetic, calling him by his name, Linful Darius. Linful clutches his wounded hand, calling Ryuki an insolent stranger. He lunges for his sword on the ground, yelling that he'll defeat him. But the young man hits him first with a punch to the face. The impact sends him flying back, making him crash hard onto the ground. Ryuki then picks up the sword and asks where he got such a terrible Yggdrasil item. He says that while he can't use its skills like the owner, a piece of junk like this is more than enough for someone like his opponent. Linful calls him a bastard again. Then he turns and starts running, and Ryuki questions his escape in this situation. He prepares to advance, stating that it wasn't a wise choice. Linful runs, calling him a crazy monster, but tells himself there's still a way out. Ryuki watches him intently. He runs into a crowded street, thinking that his opponent is still an unknown after all. In the crowd, a woman recognizes Linful, and a man points to the marks from the fight on his hands, asking who his adversary is. Ryuki appears on the street with the sword. People identify him as Ryu 7017, the unknown who clears the deep sea escape. Someone comments that he recently defeated Linful in World of Phantasm and wonders if he's fighting in real life too. Linful claims that an unknown trying to attack a gold is a crime beyond the worst of crimes. He points out the scene to the crowd, an unknown wielding a weapon chasing a wounded gold. Then he taunts him, saying an unknown's testimony has no legal weight and asks what he'll do now. Ryuki throws the sword on the ground and tells them to arrest him. He then argues that if an unknown attacked him, it would be self-defense for him to fight back right there. With his hands up, Ryuki says that if Linful defeats him now, he'll be innocent, calling it golden opportunity. And he adds with a smile, of course, if you can, that is. Linful is shocked and furious at the provocation. He wonders what Ryuki's plan is, but concludes it's probably just a bluff and a real opportunity. In front of all the cameras, he realizes he can avenge his humiliation from the game and proudly announce his comeback. Linful then picks up the sword from the ground. He charges forward, screaming for the kid to be defeated, but his opponent dodges the blow. Ryuki states the attack is so sloppy it's almost pathetic and that he feels no tension at all. Linful yells at him to shut up and spins the sword, creating a circular attack on the ground. The blow hits the ground with a series of impacts. Ryuki dodges and taunts him, saying he should have brought his spear, but then remembers he doesn't have it anymore. Linful then asks him how long he'll keep dodging like a rat. In response, the young man hits him with a direct punch to the face. He states that his opponent is mistaken, as this isn't a duel, and reminds him that he was the one who kicked his own brother out. Linful gets up with his sword in hand, wiping his face. Then, he leaps and unleashes a series of arcing attacks with the sword. He gets closer and swears he will definitely defeat him. Ryuki is hit by debris and staggers back. Linful identifies this as his chance to attack. He moves in, taking advantage of the distraction, but the young man prepares to end the fight right then and there. Ryuki blocks the sword strike using only his small knife. He states that Linful went too far by turning the city into a mess and attacking innocent citizens. Linful questions him, not understanding what he's talking about. He denies attacking any citizens, but Linful's previous attack had actually been aimed at a civilian, forcing the young man to intervene and protect her. A man yells for everyone to run, warning that Linful is out of control as he helps an injured person. Amid the chaos, Linful wonders if he was the one who caused all this destruction and hurt people. He then accuses the young man of obstructing his view and asks when that happened. He screams, questioning when all this chaos started. The reflection of a camera flash appears in his eye. A bystander points to the recording, calling Linful a psychopath and stating that it's over for him now. With several phones filming, people question how Lenza could ever consider a man like him their ace. Linful tells them to stop, but the young man asks if he really thought the media would be on his side. He continues, saying that now that he's wielded the sword in front of the media, he's the one who's going to end up on the news. The man attacks again, and the crowd screams to get out of the madman's way. Linful tells himself this is all the Unknown's plan, and that if he just defeats him, everything will be resolved. Ryuki congratulates him amid several eyes watching him in the darkness. Linful's face contorts in pure terror. Ryuki emerges from the dust and says that his opponent's journey ends right at this moment. Then, he asks if he still doesn't remember his name. In a flashback, Linful accuses him of talking behind his back and forgetting his own worth, but he still congratulates him, as his time was coming to an end. Back in the present, Linful finally remembers the name and screams it in fury. A breaking news report covers the incident that plunged the city into fear the previous night. The newscast reports that Linful Darius has been arrested and that the whereabouts of Ryu 7017 remain unknown. A man in dark glasses approaches the guild leader and asks if the press conference went well. With a grim look, the leader announces his plans from that moment on. He declares that he will mobilize the entire Linza guild, and they will spare no means or methods, even if it means paralyzing the entire world of Phantasm. He vows they will find Ryuki, no matter what, and that he will handle the matter personally. A man announces the start of the Linza Guild's emergency press conference. He declares that Linful Darius was expelled due to internal affairs and that the incident is unrelated to the guild. Meanwhile, Linful is seen behind the bars of a cell. Reporters question him about Linful's account being deleted and the reason for the attack on Ryu 7017. The guild leader explains that they investigated the player, Ryu 7017, who had declared war on them. He mentions a power that forcibly deletes data from the game's labyrinths, an ability that can be used in other games as well. Based on this, they judge that Ryu 7017's very existence was a risk factor and are using all of the guild's resources to subdue him. The reporters continue to snap photos during the conference. The man then declares that the Linza Guild will protect the world of Phantasm from the clutches of Ryuki. 1 month after the announcement, online comments mock the guild for not having captured the player yet. Someone types on a keyboard while reading comments that Ryu 7017 is in hiding and that there are no new videos. The person slams their fist on the table, frustrated by comments accusing them of being a Linza member. A woman wonders what Ryuki has been doing for a month without posting any videos. A young, red-haired woman enters and asks what Laguna is mumbling about, and she greets her, asking about the guild leader. The girl replies that Gabriel went to meet that pig and complains that the guild works them to the bone. The red-haired woman stretches, complaining that things have only gotten busier lately due to the vice leader's absence and the increased workload. She blames it all on that Ryu, saying Linful lost carelessly and questions using all their manpower to capture him. Laguna wonders why they're making such a big deal about an unknown who won because of a bug. She stands up and says the other doesn't understand, as Ryu 7017 is on a different level and his existence defies common sense. The red-haired woman asks where this amazing guy is now, accusing him of just causing trouble and then hiding. Laguna replies that only Ryu 7017 himself would know that. She suddenly looks to the side, noticing something on her screen. A notification for a new video pops up on her screen, and she wonders what it is. At the top of the RatiaSoft headquarters, someone questions if they still haven't dealt with Ryu 7017. The guild leader apologizes, but the other man says apologies are useless and reminds him of his order to handle the matter in reality. He complains that they are fighting a mere unknown, regardless of whether they call him a bug or a cheat. Duke Stivero Ratia, the CEO of RatiaSoft, asks if he overestimated their capabilities. The CEO comments that resource mining is declining and that the Linza Guild's management is becoming more disappointing by the day. The guild leader apologizes again, but the CEO states he's losing his patience with that obsolete junk. He then says it would be inconvenient for World of Phantasm to collapse now, at least not until a certain project is complete. The CEO offers to present the future of RatiaSoft, a masterpiece that will reshape the entire gaming industry. The guild leader watches intently and questions what it is. A video notification appears on his screen and he recognizes it. On the street, people comment that the unknown has resurfaced and wonder why he's back. In his video, Ryuki introduces himself to the viewers after destroying a god game. He mentions watching the Linza Guild's press conference, where the leader called him an enemy of society. He finds it funny to be called that and says he'll crush World of Phantasm soon. Today's video is just a preview of what's to come, featuring the same thump builder. He explains that the place once popular was abandoned due to poor management, and that abandoned game labyrinths are usually shut down. He then questions in which cases game labyrinths are shut down. The first case is when resources run out, as games considered masterpieces usually have abundant resources. He contrasts this with resource mining in World of Phantasm, which is in sharp decline. The second case is when the number of users falls below a certain threshold, which would have also closed this game soon. Then he announces the third and final case, commenting on how timely his appearance is. He introduces the Thump God Cube, the divine entity that creates the labyrinth, and the reason the game became junk. He then materializes a weapon in his hand. Holding his sword, he announces he will destroy the Thump God Cube. The red-haired woman calls it an absurdity that should be possible within the system. The other woman recognizes the weapon as the same one from the World of Phantasm video and wonders how he can use it in another game labyrinth. The God Cube then sends small, cube-shaped soldiers to attack him. Ryuki charges forward and attacks the soldiers with his sword. He explains that the soldiers are weak and have simple attack patterns, but the reason the game failed is something else. It was the endless attacks that destroy everything and make building impossible due to poor difficulty balancing. He leaps over the cubes, using them as platforms to get closer. He launches himself into the air and questions what happens if the root cause is destroyed. Then he plunges his sword directly into the God Cube. Kneeling on the creature, he reveals the final method to shut down a game labyrinth, when a critical, irreplaceable failure occurs in the system. With a smile, he states that this makes it impossible to maintain the labyrinth itself. He then extends his hand and activates the delete command. The God Cube begins to break apart. Then he watches the game world disintegrate around him. He explains that now that he has deleted the management system, the game labyrinth will automatically shut down. The remaining cube soldiers start to vanish into thin air. The red-haired woman questions if he really destroyed the game labyrinth. Her colleague wonders if the same ability that deleted Linful's avatar can affect the labyrinth itself. He thanks everyone who watched and promises they'll see the same scene in World of Phantasm soon. Then he says he'd like to correct the nonsense spoken by a high-ranking person about the world's collapse. He clarifies that if World of Phantasm falls, what will be ruined is RatiaSoft and the Linza Guild. He points forward and states that he is not an enemy of society. Then he declares that his targets are only them. A long line of players forms at the entrance of the Verdant Illusion dungeon. He studies a wanted poster with a smirk. A guild officer checks a list regarding a suspicious incident and lets a group pass. Two players in line complain about being watched for a month just because Ryuki went into hiding. Another player wearing a helmet tells them to be quiet. The officer calls the next person in line and orders him to remove his gear for an identity check. Then the helmed man materializes a gunblade and asks if this is what he's talking about. The guards recognize him as Ryu 7017 and order headquarters to be contacted immediately. He scoffs at them, saying it must be hard looking for a single unknown person in broad daylight with such an obvious disguise. He claims he's just testing new skills and warming up a bit before entering the dungeon. With a swift sword draw, he strikes one of the guards. He then considers switching weapons and materializes a new sword. He wields the Soul Slicer Blade, a weapon that always lands critical hits against spirit-type enemies. The remaining guard calls him an arrogant man and charges with his axe. But Ryuki stops him with a direct blow. He turns and prepares to strike as the guard falls defeated to the ground. The guild officer wonders what he's been doing for the past month, as those skills aren't from World of Phantasm. 1 month earlier, Ryuki decides to stay out of World of Phantasm for a while, since the Linza Guild has started making moves. Egon questions him for coming to the game Labyrinth, and he explains that he needs to test if he can break it and obtain new skills. He then enters the game's Celestial Dragon Blade online, stating he needs a new power. He faces an enemy on a mountaintop seeking enough power to avoid losing to the Linza Guild and Raisha Soft. But a "You have been defeated" screen appears as he lies on the ground. The same defeat screen pops up again, and once again he is defeated in the game. An older man laughs, saying that even after so much suffering, he came back for more. The Sword Demon, the final boss, offers to show him the pinnacle of the path he has achieved. Ryuki then punches the ground in frustration. He thinks there must be a way to win, even without strategy guides for a dead game. He decides to use the random box, but his device reminds him that the points are for upgrading skills. Then, he gets an idea when thinking of the phrase "by any means necessary." At the final gate, the Sword Demon laughs and says he doesn't know when to quit. He asks if he doesn't realize it's pointless to keep trying and that the ignorant should know their place. Ryuki enters the gate and replies that he's heard his lines so many times he has them memorized. He challenges the boss to a fight, telling him to cut the chatter. The Sword Demon calls him insolent. He charges forward, questioning how a fool who barely survived dares to insult him. Then he unleashes a series of area of effect attacks to see what the young man is made of. Ryuki dodges his attacks. The boss closes in and asks if that was all he had, just an empty boast. He blocks the Sword Demon's strike, and their blades clash. The boss praises his ability to cross swords with him and prepares to show the true power of the Celestial Dragon Blade. But a grenade explodes right in his face. He's thrown back by the blast and accuses him of using an unexpected trick with a bomb disguised as a pine cone. The young man reveals several grenades and the boss calls him a cheater. Then he throws all the grenades, which explode in succession. The Sword Demon questions if he thinks he can defeat him with a mere toy. He notices the smoke and asks if it's poison, but boasts that he's immune to all types. The young man puts on a gas mask and says that it's not poison, but it will be perfect for his opponent's keen senses. The boss covers his nose, complaining about the stench of the skunk gas bomb. He calls him a vile individual and asks if he's mocking him as he attacks. The young man equips sunglasses and earplugs as he throws flashbangs. The Sword Demon is stunned by the flashes. He claims that even without sight or hearing, finishing him will be nothing and prepares an attack. The boss focuses to strike. The young man's device questions if its master is human, but he replies that he just followed orders not to hold back. He explains there was no way the boss would know how to counter grenades and guns in a martial arts game. The other players recognize him and wonder if that's the dragon's key skill from the recently shut down game. He then turns and sends a message to Gabriel before entering the dungeon. He comes face to face with the boss monster, the Ruby Tree Spirit Lebanon. The creature lets out a terrifying shriek. A small creature, a shadow dragon named Ramut, is summoned. He comments that despite its appearance, that's one scary creature. Egon congratulates him on breaking the dungeon record, and he believes his other summons will become useful. He then mentions the name Azia and says it's time to go as there's nothing left to see there. Agon calls out to him, and he replies that he already knows while standing in a portal. With a smile, he comments that it was one grand illusion. He turns and comes face to face with a large group of players. Someone asks if he's coming back as they heard he had retired from gaming. Then, the legend himself, Gabriel Darius, introduces himself while holding a book. Gabriel says he was expecting him, but he's surprised to see an army mobilized to capture just one master. The young man observes there are over 1,000 of them and wonders if Linza has completely lost its mind. Gabriel then calls him by his name, Ryui, and says he has a proposal for him. He questions if threat would be a more fitting word with all these men around and tells Gabriel to get straight to the point. So Gabriel invites him to return to the Linza Guild, promising to revoke his unknown status and guarantee him a gold position. Ryuki asks if the position of the guild's heir even makes sense for him. He grips his weapon and remarks that they're really trying hard to recruit him, even when his goal is their destruction. He points his weapon forward and shouts his answer, rejecting the offer. Gabriel then charges forward, and Ryuki and Gabriel's swords clash. To celebrate the decision, Gabriel reveals he knows about the hospital where his mother was admitted. He then reveals that the cause of his mother's passing wasn't natural, leaving the young man shocked. The young man shoves him back, questioning if he really expects him to believe that. Gabriel states that it's something he can verify himself and that he has fulfilled his purpose there, which was to suggest and confirm. He comments that the skills and items that didn't exist in the original game system are quite intriguing. Gabriel announces they will leave for today and that he'll be waiting at the top of the tower, but the young man questions who gave him the right to decide that. He then uses his skill to fly and says he'll wait for him, if he can get past all those players. He flies away and declares to all the Linza Guild members that whoever defeats Ryu 7017 will receive the same offer he just made. Gabriel believes it's impossible for one person to face 1,000 opponents, no matter how extraordinary their powers are. He plans to uncover the secret of the young man's power as soon as he's subdued, but a huge explosion from below sends several players flying. An enormous beam of energy shoots up towards Gabriel. Ryuki calls out to Gabriel as his new weapon emits smoke. He then says Gabriel got it wrong and asks who said he was done here. Some players on the ground wonder how he managed to defeat hundreds with a single blow, while others urge everyone not to panic. One of the players shouts that they can get him if they just overwhelm him with numbers. An archer orders everyone to use ranged attacks. A shower of attacks is launched in his direction with the promise that the final blow will secure the guild's leadership. The young man faces the approaching onslaught. The multiple attacks collide in a massive explosion. One of the players looks at the smoke and asks if they got him. Then the dust settles, revealing no one is there, and one of them shouts that he's gone. A player questions how he could have used a return stone, which takes at least 10 seconds to activate. Another suggests it might have been a logout and orders everyone to stay on guard, as he will reappear in the same spot. Gabriel watches the scene, finding it unbelievable that this is even possible. He acknowledges that Ryuki got him this time, but states it won't happen again. Elsewhere, Ryuki comments that the fight was fun and promises to finish off Gabriel and the tower next time. He then turns to continue with his plans. He reveals he got 2 new SSR skills, Limit Break and Enchantment. He complains that this was all he got from 1,000 tickets, and Wegan reminds him he should be grateful. Ryuki paces back and forth, and the device asks what the plan is now. He declares it's time to begin and prepare to head for the tower. A ranking screen shows that Ryuki is breaking all dungeon conquest records at an insane speed. He keeps setting new records, a feat people consider impossible due to level restrictions. A new dungeon record is set in the Dawn Mist Prairie, while comments question if Ryu 7017 is just using bugs. He then sets another record in the Temple of Aurora, and someone wonders if he'll be the first to clear the tower. A red-haired man receives news that Ryu 7017 has been spotted in a nearby dungeon and orders immediate mobilization. In a tavern, a group of players complains about having to go after him right after finishing a hunt. An armored player asks the innkeeper if he isn't going too, but the man replies he's not interested in the matter. The player finds it strange that he doesn't care, even though the target is trying to destroy the labyrinth he lives in. Then the innkeeper reveals he originally came from the Pong world, an incredibly old game labyrinth. He explains that he's been through countless shutdowns and destructions, but the youth of today seem to think differently. The armored young man asks what he means by youth. A memory shows a man questioning for how long they must bow their heads to the players. A man in red armor raises a flag declaring that this is their world, where they were born and where they will live. He incites the crowd to expel the outsiders and reclaim their world. The Crimson Infiltration Unit announces they no longer need players and will attack the dungeon tomorrow, with the people's support. The innkeeper calls them a bunch of hot-headed youths and wonders if they don't realize the reality of the situation. He then warns that the customers have already left and he's about to close up shop, suggesting the players should head home too. Ryuki drops his disguise and asks if there's any more information. Using a teddy bear avatar, he explains that the Crimson Infiltration Unit is a group formed by the game's own residents, led by Kugan. Kugan has already tried to challenge the dungeon several times and now confidently declares he will conquer it. Biegon states the action is not just reckless, but a one-way trip, as residents cannot resurrect if they are defeated. Ryuki asks if the NPCs found a way to conquer the dungeon, and the other says that's the crucial part. He then reveals that GAES has made contact with the Crimson Infiltration Unit, and the young man questions in surprise about GAES. An image of Cynthia smiles as the text questions if Asia contacted the NPCs through a bug. Ryuki says he has a bad feeling about this and decides it's best to follow them.